If the members don't mind, begin making your way back into the committee room. Okay, if you don't mind making your way back to your seat, we're about to get started. We've got a very special guest with us. Members, thanks for joining us back. I think it's only fitting and appropriate that following lunch we should have our state's new Agriculture Commissioner come and present his FY23 amended and FY24 budgets. Commissioner Tyler Harper, congratulations, and the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's great to be back, and great to be with all my friends and colleagues over the years. And I noticed, Mr. Chairman, the Chairman Hatchett has on a phenomenal ag tie today, and I just wanted to recognize that and appreciate your support of the ag industry and obviously the Department of Agriculture. And we look forward to working together and ensuring that our number one industry continues to be successful. But it is good to be here with y'all, and obviously in a different capacity. I've sat in your seats for many years and look forward to our work together in a new role in ensuring that our state's number one industry continues to be successful. So just to kind of give you just a brief update in regards to the department and what we have going on, as y'all all know, today is I guess in business days is my fourth day on the job. So today is day 4. So we're working hard, and we've hit the ground running, and we're trying to go to work to ensure that our farmers and producers across this state have the resources that they need, as well as consumers understand where their food comes from and the importance of supporting Georgia grown and Georgia producers and Georgia farmers. And that's what we're going to work to do every day. As y'all know, just really brief, agriculture is our number one industry. It is our state's number one economic driver. It is what helps ensure that our state has been successful. You know, we've been named the number one state for business, and I'm proud of that. We're proud of that for many years in a row, and I would tell you that a lot of that has to do with our number one industry. Our number one industry has to be successful for our state to be successful, and that's where agriculture comes in and where it plays. And in reality, at the heart of it, agriculture really is national security, and it's something that I think we should all be concerned about, because if we're not providing our own food, our own fiber, our own shelter right here in our own borders at home, and we're not empowering Georgia farmers and Georgia producers and the American farmer and the American producers, we're less safe as a state, as a community, as a nation. And that's why it's important that we ensure that we allow the ag industry to continue to be successful. And we're going to do that through your Department of Agriculture, our Department of Agriculture, and working hand in hand together to make that happen. And I look forward to our joint efforts in making that happen. Just a brief staff update. You know, a lot of the team that Commissioner Black had is staying on board, and we look forward to our joint efforts working together. But we've brought on a few new people as well. Most of them are standing in the back or sitting in the back. I brought a lot of, I'll tell you what, since everybody's turning around, if you're with the department, if you want to stand up really quick and wave at everybody. So glad to have them on the team, and this is most of the senior team that you'll be seeing from or hearing from our agency. And so we have a phenomenal team that we've put together, and many of you know we've had a few people that we've brought from over here to across the street, Kathy Little being one of them, and we're glad to have her on the team. So she's helping us out tremendously over there among many of our other members that are in the back. So but appreciate them and their work. All of you know we passed the Farm to Food Bank legislation last year, and I'll get into this a little more in detail in the budget presentation, but I just wanted you to know that it's been a tremendously successful program. It has been awesome in what we've been able to do through that program for our farmers, our producers, but also for families in need across this state. And it's been an awesome opportunity for us to really bridge that gap between those two, and we'll hit on that in a minute. In regards to Georgia Grown, y'all know that Commissioner Black and what we've done with that has been phenomenal. And we look forward to working together and building on some new ideas that we have and taking that to another level and allowing Georgia Grown to be part of every household across this state, and allowing consumers to understand the importance of buying locally grown products and supporting our Georgia producers. And we're going to work to do that every single day. Obviously, partnerships are very important to the department and what we do, and working with our partners, whether it's at the University University of Georgia and our cooperative extension service across this state, or it's working with all of you and what we do every single day, but also in similar to what I know Chairman Walker and Chairman Dickey have worked on in regards to innovation in agriculture and precision ag and what we're doing and what we're working to do in Perry. Those are phenomenal partnerships between the fairgrounds and what we're working to ensure that agriculture continues to be successful. So we're going to continue to work on those partnerships, whether it's with the Department of Education or others, to ensure that our ag industry continues to be successful. We do have a new website. You can check that out. It is mobile friendly now, so you can pull it up on your iPhone. Unfortunately, you couldn't do that in the past, but we're proud to roll that out. And last but not least is what I want to talk about really quick is I will love opportunities to come visit with you and your constituents in your districts. So if you have things that come up in your area, your part of the state that we can help with through the Department of Agriculture, that I can help with, let us know how we can do that. Keep us posted on what you have going on and how we can be beneficial to each other and help each other, ensuring that we're serving the joint constituencies that we all have. So I look forward to our opportunity to do that. We were asked to give an update.
Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
I hate to tell you, but you spent 10 minutes on your first slide. I hope you don't have many more slides.
We're going to move fast, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
All right.
It was a very nice picture, though.
Well, I appreciate that.
Very nice picture.
I figured you liked my picture. In regards to the budget that we all passed, that I voted for last year, what was included in that budget, you can see on the screen, $3.2 million for a $5,000 cost of or pay raise for state employees. We were very proud, obviously, to do that jointly together. Obviously, it was very beneficial to the department. Just to kind of give you an update on where that's at, obviously, we have federal employees that work for the State Department of, not federal employees, we have federally funded employees that work for the Department of Agriculture, 50-50 shares or 75-25s or 80-20 shares in some cases. So we requested that money from the feds. It was about $320,000 or so. So far, we have received about a little over half of that, so we still are awaiting about $150,000 from the feds for the $5,000 pay raise for our employees in the Department of Agriculture, just to give you an update there. In regards to the money that we put in the budget last year to allow employees to withdraw up to 40 hours of annual leave, we have not dispersed any of that money. We're still, my understanding is what I've been told is we're still waiting on instructions on how we need to do that and disperse that. But that is something definitely that our employees are interested in. You see the changes in the ERS and also the statewide adjustments that are made. Those are normal adjustments, as you all know, that we make every year in regards to the budget and what we do there. Further, what we did last year, the General Assembly gave the Department of Agriculture the ability to move some money out of marketing into administration to offset some additional costs there, and obviously that was an appreciated move to help us there. And I talked about the Farm to Food Bank program already briefly. What I didn't say was so far today we have expended about $440,000 of that. We expect the remaining $350 or so to be expended by the end of January, if not the first week or two of February. So by the first week or so of February, we'll have expended all $800,000 of that. We also have an additional $170,000 or so that are federal funds that we have gotten through DHS. We're still waiting on those executed agreements to get in place before we can expend those funds to address this and allow our farmers and producers to be connected to our families in need across this state. The Georgia Agricultural Trust Fund, there was almost 1.9 put in that in the budget last year. Those funds are primarily used, and what they will primarily be used for is in regards to upgrades at the farmers markets, which we will begin working on. We're in the middle of an assessment right now, an internal assessment, and I can give you more information on that as when needed, or as requested. But that's what those dollars will be used for. We have no changes in FY23. So I'm just going to skip ahead to FY24. There's in the governor's budgets, Obviously, the governor put the $1.3 million in for us for the $2,000 pay raise, and I will tell you, first and foremost, that is tremendous help for our agency and our employees, and we are very thankful. I have already instructed my staff to begin conversations with our federal partners. It's going to be about $131,000 in what we need in the federal side for us to offset their match to ensure that all of our employees get the $2,000 pay raise. So we have already begun the process of asking our federal partners for those dollars. The other that you see is $40,000 in statewide adjustments, and also the almost $243,000 in regards to the trust fund. In regards to our requests, these are things that that we're looking at as far as our agency and needs that we have. Raw milk, as many of you know, was Chairman Perkel's bill last year, and something that we passed and were able to get across the finish line. That start date is July 1, and right now we're going to need some additional support staff, additional personnel, additional lab equipment, among other things, to help us get that off the ground and get it running. So our request is about $777 or so in amended fiscal year 23, so we can hit that start date of July 1, and then the ongoing would be a little over 1.27 in FY24. We have initiated a SART team within the department, a state agricultural response team. What this team does is, many of you probably know that Department of Agriculture is involved in emergency management situations. Whenever the SOC goes active, the Department of Agriculture is involved in that. But also there are issues related to agriculture that we're involved in specifically, such as avian influenza, which has been one of the major issues over the last year, especially. And so we have a team dedicated to emergency management, but that team is not big enough to take care of the lift that it takes when these situations arise. So we have expanded and asked many employees at the department to be part of a response team. And so we're asking for some additional funds to help us with that response team to ensure that we have the appropriate training for all of those team members, but also have the opportunity to maybe give some salary adjustments to those folks if they take on some additional responsibility above and beyond their normal work of scope. And so that's what that would be for. The Tifton lab is that request for $150,000 is for recommissioning of the lab in Tifton to ensure that we can maintain the credibility and integrity of the lab, and we would request those additional funds to help in that. The last thing I want to hit on, and it kind of goes in line, I think, with a lot of other state agencies. Before I got to the department began a comprehensive salary study of how the Department of Agriculture matches other of our counterparts across the nation, other state departments of agriculture. And I will tell you, we've got some of that information back, and preliminarily, the majority of our employees, on average, we are well underpaid when it comes to our counterparts in Alabama and Tennessee and Florida and other states in the southeastern U.S. So what we're working to get more of that information together, but obviously our goal would be to try to get to around the 50th percentile, but I look forward to having more conversation with you in our subcommittees and offline in that regard. That said, Mr. Chairman, that's my update, that's my presentation. I appreciate our work together. I appreciate the committee's work. I appreciate the opportunities we're going to have to serve our state together and ensure that our #1 industry continues to be successful. And we're going to work every day at the department to make that happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
We
Mr.
have,
Chairman.
right now we have 2 questions. We'll start off with a man in your industry. Chairman Dickey.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner,
Yes,
for being here, and appreciate your enthusiasm and fast start and your dedication to promoting agriculture. But one of the big responsibilities you have, and you alluded to it, is regulatory and food safety. And I just want this committee to be aware of how important food safety is throughout our state with agriculture and our food industry here, and I hope you have the resources to be able to accurately inspect our milk, our meat, and even our gasoline. Have you got the new stickers on the gas pumps yet?
We're working to do it.
Okay.
As long as there's no I did it stickers on there too.
But
so
anyway,
we'll
I
be
know
good.
your department has needs, and
Do they have your picture on them?
But food safety, especially at our Atlanta Farmers Market Terminal, needs a lot of updating and renovation, and just hope this committee recognizes the need for your department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate those comments, and you're all right. It's our employees that ensure that food safety is paramount, and if we don't have the folks out there inspecting our processing plants and food processing plants and our meat facilities, then we can't get that product to market, and those businesses can't operate. So if we want to allow ag to be successful, those businesses need to be successful, and they need to be able to operate, and we need people to be there to do that, and we need the resources to make that happen. So I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I'm trying to find out whether you got any programs over there. I'm looking at getting into catfish farming.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm sure we can help you with that, Mr. Senator Lucas. I know that you are a very avid outdoorsman, and not only can you catch catfish quite well, I know you can shoot some turkeys pretty good too, because we've done it together. So we'd be happy to talk to you about some catfish farming, Senator Lucas.
Representative Nulowitz, is that you? I wasn't sure. Okay.
Thank you. So we mentioned food safety. There's an issue that I've been hearing a lot about and reading a lot about, and it's best by dates. A lot of food is thrown away, wasted before it needs to be, because best by dates, with only one or two exceptions, baby formula being one of the exceptions, are really entirely arbitrary and set by the manufacturer. And so as a result, a tremendous amount of food goes to waste, goes to the landfills. It's an expensive problem for a lot of reasons. Is that anything? I know there's talk at the federal level for legislation. Are there any policies or anything that your office is considering or thinking about or would like to talk more about?
So I'll just be honest with you, that'd be something I would have to get back with you on, and we'd be happy to follow up with you. Most of that obviously is federally regulated, especially through the FDA, but I'd be happy to get with my team, and we'll work on that and see if there's something that we could work together and figuring out a way to see if there's a way that we could address that. So
I'd like that. Thank you.
yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Last question, Chairman Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Commissioner. You're looking good up there.
Well, I do what I can. I got my style advice from you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. My question, I apologize, I came in late because I have a group here today that from back in Columbia County that actually can vote for me, so I had to go see them. But anyway, my question is, and you may already said this, how many vacancies do you have in your department now?
So, Mr. Chairman, since you brought that up, my understanding currently, and obviously I'm trying to get my arms around everything. Like I said, this is day 4 for me. We have about 170 open positions at the Department of Agriculture, 70 of which are part-time, 100 of those are full-time. We have about 540 current employees on the books. So we're slotted for about 700 positions at the department. So we have a good number of open positions, and a lot of those positions are inspector level positions that are just tough to hire for. Primarily, we interview those folks. They go through the interview process, and they end up deciding to take other opportunities, because most of those other opportunities, well, all those other opportunities pay more. So it's a situation we're dealing with, and we're going to have to work through. But I would love the cooperation of the General Assembly in helping us work through that and allowing us to be able to address those issues and have the resources we need to do what Chairman Dickey and I were talking about a minute ago. But thank you for asking that question. I look forward to our work together to ensure that we're addressing those needs and that we fill those vacancies.
Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you so much for being here, and thank you. You have some other questions, but we'll let you take them offline if you don't mind for time's sake.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take those offline. Yes,
I want to
sir.
say this, though. I really appreciate the effort that Commissioner Black put in and then you've put in and continued to increase the federal funds where that is appropriate and needed for your agency. Thank you for following the
Well, you
FY
can-
24 guidance and 23 guidance on that.
You can count on us to continue to do that with our federal partners, and we're going to continue that work. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you all very much. I look forward to our work together and ensuring our state continues to be the best state to business and the agriculture continues to be number one. God bless y'all and your work. We'll see you soon. Thank y'all.
Our next presentation will come from another constitutional officer, General Commissioner John King, Department of Insurance.
Thank you so much,
Good to see
Mr.
you,
Chairman. I'm glad the Ag Commissioner softened you all up a little bit, so I appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak with y'all. Good afternoon, Chairman Hatchett, Chairman Tillery. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and chat with y'all today. A couple of the things that I want to outline is some of the things that we've been able to achieve thanks to this committee's work and allowing us to have the tools to fix, as you know, it was a troubled agency for quite some time. And I want to thank the members of these two committees that have allowed us to get the tools so we could get this agency back on its tracks, and now we want to make those changes permanent. You know, we've made some significant progress, as you can imagine, over the last 3 years since I took over. And as I begin my first session after being elected for a full term, I wanted to highlight some of the work we've accomplished with the funds that you all have provided us. I will begin with a brief summary of what we've been implemented in FY23 funds, moving to the Governor's amended FY23 and FY24 budget recommendations. Significant budget changes from FY23 included moving over $800,000 from insurance regulation over to the fire safety side of our agency to hire 10 additional employees, included much needed fire and building inspectors. As Georgia continues to attract new businesses and job creation, our agency had to prioritize inspections for new construction at the expense of existing buildings and due to the current staffing levels. We do not want to be responsible for slowing down Georgia's economic growth. However, I have some ongoing concerns as it deals with existing construction, and we are addressing those in this budget request. We've used new funds that you provided us to hire 2 additional fire safety educators and to help us share with the community the risk reduction, as we noticed over the years that the deaths as a result of fires in homes had increased, and we're trying to address that by going into the school system and talking to kids so they can take those lessons back home on fire and safety education, especially smoke detectors and those kind of things. We've quadrupled our number of arson canines from 2 to 8 who are spread across the state. No fire chief today has to wait more than 90 minutes to have a trained investigator with the canine to investigate suspicious fires. And why is this important? Because that means that fire crews don't have to stand by a fire scene and tie up a whole fire crew, basically waiting for the state investigator to show up. And I thank you all for the opportunity to increase. We're not trying to replicate what fire departments are already doing. What we're looking at is where they have gaps, where us as an agency can step in and help them out. These canine teams and investigators responded to 142 fires last year, including and filed over 124 charges for arson. Something is unprecedented over the history of our department. And so obviously we're concerned about the number of fire fatalities. They've been very steady, between 123 to 142 per year in our state. With the passage of the Mental Health Parity Act last year, we received funds to allow us to hire a mental health parity officer. All right. This new position is overseeing our agency's efforts to hold insurers accountable when it comes to covering the cost of mental health services for those who need them the most. The new program was added in an amended FY22 budget for the implementation of the Patients First Act and was passed by the legislature in 2019 and signed into law by Governor Kemp. $15 million went into the implementation of the Georgia Access website, while another $124 million funded the state's new reinsurance program. Governor Kemp's outlined the state of the state last year. The reinsurance program is already paying great dividends by reducing health care premiums an average of 12% statewide, including up to 30% in parts of our rural parts of our state. It's making a difference already, and I'm very glad that we are making a difference when it comes to insurance premiums. This program has also attracted 5 new carriers to our state and to the market. In the last 2 years, nearly tripling the number of carriers to a total of 11. And we were in crisis in many parts of our state where we only had single carriers operating in our state. So this money is making a difference in the marketplace. We've also increased the special fraud funds by $825,000 to complete our 2-year plan to fully staff our division. These funds are paid directly by the insurance industry. Our special fraud division is made up of certified law enforcement officers who investigate illegal insurance activities perpetrated by companies, agents, and individuals. Thanks to these new funds, we have grown our number of agents from 6 to 23, significantly bringing down the caseloads per agent and leading to more cases closed and prosecutions. Ladies and gentlemen, we were number 2 in the nation for insurance fraud. And when I first took office, this was an area that I wanted to make a difference. We needed to get Georgia out of those top rankings. We've also recently launched a new case management system that will allow Georgia citizens, insurance companies, law enforcement agencies to easily report insurance fraud to our state. We've implemented new financial forensic software to assist our agents in fraud investigations. And I'm proud to announce that thanks to our efforts, special fraud has recovered over $3 million in restitution to victims since 2021. Before I transition to the FY23, I want to highlight a few more of our agency's accomplishments for the past few years. In 2020, you all took a leap of faith and allowed me to have $125,000 to implement a surplus lines automation system. And I knew for a new insurance commissioner for y'all to give me that opportunity was risky for y'all. But I want to tell you, thank you all so much, because that is paying incredible dividends. This system helps us collect the taxes due to our state for surplus lines. This online system replaces a former inefficient paper process that often resulted in missed tax collections. Our initial projected revenues to the state were between $500,000 to $5 million annually. I'm excited to announce today that FY22 collections increased by $28 million. From a $125,000 investment by the state, we now collect $28 million, and FY23 collections are already $10 million over last year's, thanks to this new system. So that leap of faith that y'all took with us is paying some great dividends to our state. That $38 million is new revenue directly to the state treasury in just over 2 years from a $125,000 investment. We've also used new funds that you provided to strengthen our agency's IT infrastructure and improve cybersecurity. We're the state's second largest revenue generating agency, bringing in over $1.4 billion annually. That's with a B. And when I took over, we were collecting these dollars through paper checks and homegrown systems and website built in the early 2000s. With these funds you provided us, we've upgraded these systems and moved our agency in the 21st century. We recently launched our new Georgia Insurance Management System. This system allows us to move from paper checks to online payments, from everything from agent's license, applications, staff adjustments, and name approvals. And we are currently working on expanding this system to premium tax, insurance financial oversight, and consumer complaints, all through in development. We expect to have these go live in fiscal year 2023. We've implemented CitizenServe, a web-based cloud system that allows our safety fire division to electronically accept building plans, permits, and licenses. So now we're not just tied into the office. We're out, our folks are out in the field processing and doing inspections, and not getting in the way of the incredible progress that's going on in our state. CitizenServe also allows us to digitally track inspections from buildings, elevators, and escalators and boilers, something that our agency had a difficult time tracking before we took over. And as many of y'all might not know, we have over 35,000 elevators in the state of Georgia, and growing by the day. This new system has helped us to discover and address previously unknown holes in our inspection process to better serve the people of our state. I've also rolled out a new online system designed to help us better collect and organize legal documents and more efficiently process open records requests from citizens and from the media. This system also assists us in implementing our new authorities from the recently enacted and federal surprise billing laws. Our safety fire side, we've moved to a new system in Georgia schools to report the required fire, tornado, and safety drills to our office. And this system is free to the school systems. We provide it, the state of Georgia provides it to them. In FY23, we will complete our 2-year project of replacing all our former homegrown databases to modern, efficient, and user-friendly systems. And finally, before moving to FY23, I want to highlight the last division in our agency, but perhaps one of the most important divisions in our agency, is the folks that talk to our consumers every day. Our consumer services team answers insurance questions and helps resolve disputes between insurance, agents, and policyholders. Due to their great work in 2022, we've been able to recover over $18.1 million from insurance companies back into the pockets of hardworking Georgians. I see my job always, first, is to be the advocate for the consumer. And thanks for your support, we've been able to provide our staff with the resources needed to better support consumers and hold insurance companies accountable. As we move to the governor's amended FY23 budget recommendations, there's only one change that I'd like to highlight under reinsurance. The governor has recommended $92 million to increase the cover of the state's portion of the reinsurance program, which offsets high-cost claims for Georgia's individual market. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, this reinsurance program is paying dividends already and successful in bringing down health insurance premiums and attracts new carriers to our state. And moving to the FY24 budget, beginning with the department's administration, the governor budgets includes increased cost of living and merit system adjustments. You will see a transfer of $150,000 to the fire safety division to fund the additional manufactured homes that are inspectors. And this is a shared cost, a shared activity between us and the federal government. We'll be moving funds from various programs into fire safety to fully fund these new positions. If you see the same two changes reflected in the rest of the agency's programs, with the exception of fire safety and reinsurance. For fire safety, there's $330,000 transfer from the department's administration, enforcement, and insurance regulation. And under reinsurance, you will see the cost of living adjustments for both one full-time employee overseeing this program. Lastly, there is the $92 million increase for the reinsurance program to cover the state's portion, which mirrors the funds added to the governor's FY23 amended budget. Again, these funds go directly to offsetting the high cost of claims in Georgia individual market, bringing down healthcare premiums across the state. Thank you again for the opportunity to present our agency's priorities and show that the work that we've been able to achieve thanks to this committee's incredible confidence in our ability to lead this agency. The support of this committee and the entire General Assembly has been essential and to be able for us to accomplish our mission, and we are grateful for this partnership. And I will open now, Chairman, to any questions that you or members of this committee might have.
Commissioner, you've done an excellent job because there's only one light.
That's impressive.
Chairman Perkle.
And thank you. Part of it is due to being the second presenter after lunch. And this is actually on behalf of my Senate friends. I know the House members are all taking very studious notes, but a couple of things jumped out at me that I'd like for you to repeat because I'm not sure I wrote them down correctly. One is that you went from 6 to 23 investigators for insurance fraud.
Yes, sir.
One of the great things on the reinsurance program, the governor touted it yesterday, was a 12.5% reduction in premiums. We already pay exceedingly high auto insurance rates in the great state of Georgia. At what point do you think, with this emphasis on cracking down on insurance fraud, that we might see a corresponding decrease, perhaps, in the premiums that we're paying for our auto insurance and other insurance? And secondly, just to piggyback on it, $125,000 investment to yield $28 million. If you would just go over that one more time so that we get it on record. Thank you.
I'll start with the easy question first when it comes to the great success of our surplus. In the past, Georgia depended on the self-reporting of insurance companies that sold surplus lines to report the level of activity. And so there was no way to account whether truthful, not truthful, or companies that weren't even aware that they had to pay this tax. And so we went and found a contractor that works with several other states to have a database that basically searches all the databases across the nation and even the international markets, and then sends them an invoice. And nobody has pushed back. They get the invoice, they pay it because they know that it's due. And so it was initially, we came and asked, and I know you all had, there was a lot of scar tissue in this building about the conduct of it. I know you were, but there was a lot of scar tissue because of the conduct of previous commissioners, and I clearly understand that. And my job has been to rebuild that trust with you all and obviously with the public. In that initial investment, we've been able to turn around, and it's exponentially grown because the level of activity, well, the amount of growth taking place in Georgia, all these companies are requiring somebody to manage the risk. And so that's insurance activity. That is why next to the revenue department, we bring that level of revenue to the state of Georgia by just doing our job. The other question is a little tougher, and I see my chairman, both the chairmen, and I've discussed this, auto insurance rates, and that's going to be the topic of one of our legislative items that we want to tackle, because I have a great deal of authorities, but there's some lacking authorities that I want to, and I don't want to get ahead of my chairman on my pitch to them, if you will allow me. But we're in the process of addressing auto insurance rates in Georgia, because it's been the Wild West, and we need to get that. And of course, that has also suffered as a result of previous commissioners' conduct. And so we're in the process. We have a strategy. I want to work through. If you allow me, I want to make sure that I work very closely with my chairman of both sides to make sure that we can be successful in this legislation. And so that is my number one priority for this legislative session, is tackle auto insurance rates, because we know they're too high.
Commissioner, thank you. Thanks for answering the questions of this body. We appreciate you being here. I also want to tell you personally, thank you last year. I know Chairman England and I had a lot of discussions about you with other funds, and I just want to tell you thank you for your transparency and helping us allocate those where you needed them. And I hope that the others will hear that when you showed us that, we did exactly what you asked us to do with it too. So
I appreciated the opportunity to make our case, sir, and I understand. And this is my pitch to Chairman England is like, look, I don't, as the constitutional officer, as a department head, it's not my job. I can't ignore the laws that you all pass, but they have to be funded. And so that's what my conversation. And so allow me the flexibility to move money in an absolutely transparent manner. I would greatly appreciate the opportunity to make our case and for your all support.
Thank you for the transparency. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Our next presenter, make sure you introduce yourself. I don't know if anybody in this room knows you. But it will be our new Commissioner of Labor. You can say your name when you get up here. I don't know if we remember it. Commissioner Thompson, welcome to the podium, and thank you for being here today. Thank you.
Great. That right button there that does button. This right button advances your slide.
Okay.
Commissioner Thompson, I'm just curious, your picture's not up here on this slide like the Ag Commissioner.
Ag Commissioner's a lot better looking than I am.
I thought that was a senator thing. No, and I just want to...
But I can assure you, it's coming.
We appreciate you being here, especially since you actually just gained access to your office Friday. So thank you for your patience with everyone, and hopefully everybody here will be patient with you. So thank you,
Mr. Chairman. Listen, I feel a little bit like the dog that caught the car. I'm not sure whether to hang on and every rotation my head's going to hit the ground or let go. But my senator colleagues will tell you, our former colleagues, I don't let go. I'm going to hang on. So indulge me a little bit. I appreciate the grace, but as Chairman Hatch just said, I was forbidden to be able to step on the property or intervene or interact with any of the employees until I was sworn in. But I will tell you, if I can have my team stand up, please. You're going to see as we go through this, because I want to do a little history lesson for you, many of the ones that have been there are the ones on the front lines and how important that's been. Of course, a familiar face for many of you is the two-lane travel gal right there in the end, and that's Hannah Harding. So thanks for standing and thanks for coming over. The Department of Labor, which one is it? The Department of Labor's had an image problem. I was hoping I could grow some hair in the meantime. Our number one problem, our number one challenge is image. And you take a look there, why that is. You've seen in the media for last year, fraud, some of which is valid, some isn't. And we seek to be able to change that. You're going to see underneath that, Dana Woodall. Will you stand for a minute, Dana? Former federal prosecutor we've hired. We're going to get to the bottom of this. If we've got fraud, we're going to deal with it. If we don't, we're going to remove the cloud so the Department of Labor can function for you. Because many of you are getting the questions day in and day out about this. Responsiveness. As a former member of this General Assembly, we could not get any response. That's not a people person, that's a leadership problem. Sam, will you stand? Ladies and gentlemen, Sam is assigned to you and the executive branch. If you have problems, you get it to him. It's his job to get it resolved. No longer should you be on the front, take the brunt of those calls and not have answers for your constituents. Collaboration. I know Scott's not here. I didn't see him. Scott McAfee, IIG. I'm already working with him. And Shanzia Thomas with GTA. And fiscal responsibility, many of you know Ethan in the back. Ethan is our COO. We're already going through process improvement in just a couple of days. All these things are in works right now. You talk about steering committees to be able to get to the bottom of it. Let's talk about what we found in literally 48 hours, including on Martin Luther King Day. We didn't take it off, we worked. We walked through. What we found was two major problems. Our facilities and our employees have been neglected. When you go through that facility, here's what you're seeing. We're seeing fire extinguishers that have not been updated. We're seeing water damage throughout the building. We're seeing all kinds of evidence of neglect. Ladies and gentlemen, when you have 1,200 employees that come to work in those kind of environment, it's not an excuse. But I'm telling you, it's very difficult to have a morale, any kind of a morale. And I seek to change that. That stops now. Let's talk a little bit about Governor's recommendation. $6.1 million is what we got in FY23. It's exactly the same this year. There's no change in that for 24, with the exception of COLA. Just like Commissioner of Ag, most of our employees, or many of our employees, are federally funded or partially federally funded. We're going to try and see those raises come through our federal partners, but the impact to the state, you can see, is about $26,000. Let me use this to educate you. Just like you, I was in the seats, like many of you, and had no idea what was going on at the Department of Labor, especially during the pandemic. Let's walk through this real quick. Look at 2018. 2018, there was 310,494 in claims. 19, 291,000. 2020, 4.5 million claims. 2021, it starts coming down, 927,000 claims, and then we normalize in 22 back to 2019 levels. Why is that important? Not just because of 2020, but watch the funding, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the funding. You see 18, 19, 20, pretty stable. 21, 165 mil. 22, 158, and boom. Yeah, 51. Think about that as we move forward. You know what that impact is? We're losing about 70% of our funding. Why? Because Wagner-Pizer, the grant, which is federal funded for us, the previous administration made their initiative was to move it to TCSG and other partners. I'm not here to argue with whether or not that is a wise move. I'm here to advocate for a department that we have a moral obligation to make sure we're meeting the needs of the people and the constituents in your districts. Here's the result of what's going to happen with this. These are some of the career centers that fall under our purview. 5 of them already that have been vacated because of the decisions of that, and they're moving those over to TCSG. We still have a presence there. We have a responsibility federally. So the cost of providing service for UI there goes through the roof. But yet we have been told if someone comes there for those services, redirect them to another county or another location where we have a one-stop shop. That's right. That's your constituents. 5's already done. 6 is on the way. 23 that we know of in total. It's right there. It's already laid out for you. Again, I believe it's our moral obligation to provide adequate and reasonable access to our constituents, or their service is going to diminish. And just like the number of calls we had before, they're going to rise. Did you know we have this thing called an assessment fee? It's been around for, what, 30 years, Ethan? 35 years? It's a fee that employers pay when they're filing. It's 0.8. And for some reason, we didn't call it up the last day of session and it sunsetted. Last year, it collected $10.6 million. You all know that all those funds are collected goes to the general fund. We've all talked about whether you got designated funds or not. But the General Assembly took in money that we collected basically with our fee, but it sunsetted. So one of the legislative actions we're going to ask is to reauthorize that fee to bring that back to the General Assembly as a way to be able to help fund us. Let's talk about what we're already doing. Where's Denise at? She's hiding back there somewhere. Will you stand, Denise, please? Ladies, Denise Beckwith is our UI director. She's been with the agency for a couple of years, but here's what I will tell you. When all of those claims were being filed, she was in the midst of it, working, how long did you work nonstop?
A year and a half.
Year and a half, nonstop, no days off. But when I came in, I said, we need help. We've got an image problem. The General Assembly is mandating we become fiscally responsible. We change our technology, we do the things we need, and get rid of the backlog so these people in General Assembly stop getting calls. And she said, let me go to work. And immediately she came back and said, I have identified a way to eliminate the backlog of 59,000 appeals cases. We believe we can have it done by August of 23. Thank you for doing that for us. Quickly, I'm going to keep moving. You're going to ask, what are we doing with the path forward? We're going to modernize the system for UI, tax benefits and appeals like we've talked about. It's called a lift and shift, LAS. We're already working the GTA. We're collaborating. We're going to get that off premise. We should not have our information on premise. We need it for security reasons. We're already doing it with other agencies right now. We can do it at a cost reduction because the other agencies are doing it. That's in works already in the first 2 days. We're exploring consortiums to be able to move to a more modernized technology so that we can get the reports we need. You all remember when our bond rating was at risk because we did not comply. Remember? Y'all remember that? Yeah, that's not going to happen again. Let's talk about scaling. The next time we have an issue, consortium or one of those will be able to take care of that. We talked about SAM already in external affairs. We're already doing an asset right now, one of the steering committees. We're inventorying people and assets all over the state. If we close some of these centers, ladies and gentlemen, that were federally acquired, it could be a hit back to the state because they've already been depreciated. We got to be very careful what we're doing. Let's talk about this. The state's the #1 place in the country to do business. We're proud of that. But we think we have a part in that. And we're asking for you to partner with us as we make sure we have the resources to do that. With that, gentlemen, Mr. Chairman Tillery, Chairman Hatchett, I'll open for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I think everybody, before they leave, is probably going to want Sam's cell number, so make sure he gets it there.
I'll give his blood type if you need it.
First question is Senator Beach.
Commissioner,
yes, sir.
Thanks for being here and thank you for your presentation. I know you've only been on the job 2 days, but you have a lot of people's information when you're dealing with unemployment claims. How safe and secure is that information from a cybersecurity standpoint that's in your department?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Senator Beach. That is a background of mine, you know. I'm very concerned about where we were, and I will tell you it's 3 days safer than it was before, but it's not where we need it to be. We will be there soon, but we have got to make sure we're protecting that data. And so we are. It is one of our focuses to make sure.
Go ahead.
I think that's Senator Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner.
Friend, sir.
Good to see you, sir. Could you explain a little bit further about with the reduction in funding with the Wagner-Pizer funding? How are you going to operate the agency moving forward with such significant loss in revenue? And then how do you retool your staff for that? And then more importantly, what do you need from the General Assembly to support that?
This is probably one of the most complicated agencies, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't know that 3 years ago. Our funding comes in a lot of different buckets, and when you pull a lever, it affects everyone else. So you think about that Wagner-Pizer funding, it's not as simple as the veterans when you said, okay, these people are funded for veterans, we're moving them over here. When you move that Wagner-Pizer money and you leave the 180 to 200 people that we're collecting from it, and you leave 170, is that right? Left there, you're looking at mass layoffs. I have no problem with reduction when we do it in the appropriate way. But imagine this. You take 170 people layoffs that all have tenure, you got a couple $1 million in benefits we also have to pay. If we're only getting $6 million from the state, and I got $2.5 to $3 million in benefits that I'm going to have to pay because we owe it to those people when we lay them off, you're now operating with $3 million. We're going to be coming to you, Senator Steele, with some things. Again, I need to be wise about how we approach this. We're going to right size. We're going to be efficient, but help me help you, because if you don't, we're going to have the same volume of calls. And that's not what you want. You want the Department of Labor to be over here to work in partnership with the initiatives that we have, not to be the genesis of the phone calls you're getting because people are upset because they can't get benefits and all the other things that are going with that. You also think about some of the tenants that have some of these buildings in there that we have leases, and we start severing some of those. It's gonna, some of your communities, we're gonna have to deal with that.
Commissioner, thank you.
Sure.
I think we've exhausted the questions, but now I see 2 more have popped up. If we got a few minutes, we'll see if you don't mind trying to be very quick on your questions and very quick on your answers. Senator Hufstetler.
Thank you, and I think
My senator.
many of us were extremely frustrated with this department more than any other department, and you decided to do something about it, and I really appreciate that. A question on the administrative assessment fee. Now, there is a rate that they pay based on their experience plus the administrative fee, and it's just the administrative fee that we've got to get fixed. Is that correct?
Well, I'd like to reauthorize that rate as well, because when we go back and do that, and it's a separate legislation we introduce, right now, we're actively charging. If we reauthorize, it'll bring down the cost actually for the employers. So right now, because that's sunset as well, their costs went up a little bit to the employer. So it's actually two different things.
Senator Orrock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to have you with us in your new role.
Thank you.
Former senator, newly minted commissioner, and I agree with your sense of urgency. I think it resonates with all of us. If I could be,
Thank you.
if I could underscore that about after what we've been through with this department and what our constituents have been through. So I appreciate the new thinking, and we've had an opportunity to talk about some of these things before. Can you remind us of you showed the cut, the budget cut down to, was it 53?
Yeah, roughly it's $100 million reduction, 158 to about 53.
Right. And was that accompanied by moving some responsibilities of the department? Maybe just refresh. We got a lot of new members, and just refresh the General Assembly on our both budget committees on that.
Sure. Wagner Pizer is a fund. It's a grant that comes from the feds, and it's tied to workforce solutions. And when you move that, the funding goes with it. Unfortunately, when you move that, there are other things that are tied to that. So think of it as this way: if you wanted to sell your house, right? In total, you think it's as easy as selling it, except you have an adjoining property that's deeded with that. Well, what do you do with that adjoining property? You're going to let it go with it? Well, you can't. Maybe you're leasing that out. It's very complicated. We actually have, think of this, if someone's unemployed, isn't the goal to get them reemployed? We'll have no way to know whether they're reemployed. For some of you, you said, we no longer want people to draw benefits if they're not going out and seeking a job. You move that, we'll have no way to know whether that's going to happen, because that's somewhere else. It's a complicated issue.
Commissioner, thank you so much again for being here. You've exhausted the board, and appreciate the questions that you've presented us with, as well as those you've answered. We look forward to working with you over the coming weeks and months.
Thank you, Chairman Tillman. Thank you so much.
Members, our next presentation will come from the Department of Economic Development.
Okay, I don't have one.
Good. Ready? Ms. Stevens, welcome to the podium, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Tillery, members of the committee. We want to send our thanks to Chairman Hatchett. I know he's not in here as well, but look forward to participating in our first hearing since he became committee chair in the House. My name is Joshua Stevens. I'm Director of Policy and Government Affairs of the Department of Economic Development. I have my colleague Andrew Capizzuto here with us as well. He's our Chief Administrative Officer and General Counsel. I just want to say one thing before we get started here. Without the partnership of this committee, the General Assembly, Governor Kemp, our sister agencies, and the many partners we collaborate with in our efforts all over the state, we would not be able to stand before you here today with a record of success, growth, opportunity, and consistently breaking records. As you heard the governor mention in his comments yesterday, he really laid out the headlines and the facts associated with much of the department's efforts over the last year, as well as the fact that Commissioner Wilson is traveling with them now as we speak. So Commissioner Wilson sends his regards as well as his thanks and opportunity for us to be here with you today. So please accept his regards for that. But we are here with you today, and between myself and Andrew Capizzuto, we will answer any questions that may come up, and we're just going to hit the highlights. The governor has certainly hit on a lot of the main points of successes that our department's been a part of, that the state's been a part of, and as well as what the future looks like. While I plan to hit the highlights here, one thing I want to mention before we get started is our year in review book. This is a document that we've submitted every year to the legislature over the last few years, but this document will be delivered to you guys here in the next day or so. I dropped it with the House Post Office. Within this year in review document, the last page here, you'll see a map. This map was put together by our marketing team, and this indicates all the efforts of each of our 8 divisions across the entire state. So you'll see a dot, and you can tell from where you are there the number of dots in each of the counties. This is broken up by region. So this gives you a little bit of a story of the activities of our department across the entire state, specifically within each of your regions. So I just wanted to call attention to that. And while we may have 8 different teams working in different divisions in various sectors of our economy, we are one unified team working to grow, facilitate opportunities in every corner of our state. FY22 was a record-breaking year, whether it was the largest economic development projects in history, twice broken, or records in film production spending and trade. All in all, FY22 was a phenomenal year, which I'll just touch on briefly. Within our Global Commerce Division, which is the division you most often see the headlines, and working with businesses and new industry and expansions across the state, in FY22, we announced over 51,000 jobs, $21.2 billion in investment, and 358 projects. There was also a record in foreign direct investment there as well, with over $8 billion and a 300% increase over last year's numbers, FY21. There was also 14,000 jobs associated with that foreign direct investment as well. And when we talk about statewide numbers, I want to mention the fact that 85% of those investments and more than 30,000 new jobs came from outside the 10-county metro Atlanta region. And even if you remove the 2 largest projects of which we've heard a lot about, in Rivian and Hyundai, we still broke our records from last year in jobs as well as investment. So I want to point that fact out as well. Expansion projects, or companies that chose to invest in the state again, accounted for 74% of all projects across the state during FY22. New locations to the state accounted for about 33,846 jobs during that time as well. So when you look into the trends and the information and the facts associated with those jobs and investment, one significant trend, which I had just mentioned, but a 675% increase in automotive-related jobs, as well as a 150% increase in bioscience projects. There was also an increase in headquarters projects as well as fintech as well. So one of the things that was also mentioned as a priority and very important to notate is that within electric mobility, we are off to a very strong start. Since 2018, we've announced more than 35 electric mobility related projects that will bring nearly $23 billion in investment and approximately 28,000 jobs for Georgians. So, and I certainly want to point out the fact, I think this might be the 20th time we've repeated it, but Georgia being the 9th year in a row in which we're the #1 state to do business. We're very proud of that fact and certainly appreciate all the other testimony and folks that have mentioned that fact over time and through the process here. One other thing within we got two other divisions. I just want to hit a few highlights on trade. The Trade Department, international trade, also had a record year with $42.36 billion in goods to 215 countries. One of the things I want to mention is that over about 85% of the individuals and companies that they're working with are small businesses. So they're helping Georgia companies and Georgians get their products to and from overseas. So 87% of those exporting firms in Georgia are small businesses. I mentioned the fact of 85%. the film department. I just want to mention the record spending that was indicated in FY22, $4.4 billion across 412 productions. And I won't get into all the details of those, but I do want to mention that it's not just a production story, it's also a story related to the record-setting stage space that's in development now, with over 4 million additional square feet under construction and set to occur here in the state. So I know that a lot of the testimony's been covered in highlights and successes of our department by the governor, but I certainly want to take a moment to answer any questions, but also as we get into the budget, I'm happy to point out a few things as it relates to the amended 23. It's pretty straightforward as you all look through our divisions there. There's not a lot to point out in the amended. There's a one-time funds for tourism related Georgia World Congress Center project, but then when you get into FY24, the big budget, you'll see that there are a few changes related to bringing, you've got the $2,000 raises, of course. Hopefully, we very much appreciate the support of those for our various efforts and divisions. And as you get down into, let's see, rural development, there's a few changes related to the rural development, innovation, and technology. So previously, innovation technology was not a division within our department. These were funds that were in the One Georgia Authority that were transferred as part of the Centers of Innovation and the activities around that. So those funds are not going to be transfer funds. They will now be in our FY24 budget. But that generally covers any of the main changes, as well as there's some one-time funds in tourism as well.
Thank you, Josh. You've got a couple of questions. We'll start, let's see here, with, it looks like Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hello. I have a question about international cities that we do business with. I know that we have Georgia offices in some of those countries, and I was wondering how it's selected, because there are a couple of countries that have been bringing precious resources here and doing business with Georgia, but don't have an office. I know if they have an office there, you do even more imports and exports and different things. So my question is, there's zero in the whole continent of Africa. And I know that maybe 20 plus years ago, you had one in Johannesburg, but it was closed years ago, and another one has not been open. And so my question is, do you have plans on opening one there or other countries, or how does that work?
Thank you for the question, Senator James. I'd be happy to sidebar with you on our calculus that we go through when we look at strategic markets, but I will say in short that we go through a very lengthy process looking at companies here, companies trying to export, size of the market relative to other factors as well. So a little bit of a, yes ma'am.
I also wanted to point out that the reason I picked that particular continent is because I know we opened up the Panama Canal, and they've dredged the port in Savannah, and it's a direct route from the west coast, especially of Africa, to here, and I know that they could really increase business and be a win-win for all. So I wanted to know if you were aware of that and if y'all looking at it. Go ahead.
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Senator James, and I'd be happy to meet with you, and we will answer all those questions.
Thank you very much.
Representative Mitchell. Yeah, that's you. That's you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just ask, $457,000 was removed from the upcoming budget for the King Center. Last year we were able to place some funds to place in there with the understanding that additional funding was coming next year. As just a point of comparison, $14.5 million is being granted to the lion's share of that to Stone Mountain Park, which, as you know, is a memorial to the Confederacy. I can't think of too many initiatives that have a greater impact on economic development in Georgia than what the King Center does and represents. And I'd just like to know where you stand on that appropriation and why it was removed.
Yes, sir. A lot of those, excuse me, Representative, a lot of those are one-time funds, and those were appropriated last year. And those are generally, those one-time funds are priorities put forward in our budget. The King Center, I'm not aware if that's administratively attached to us necessarily, or if it's through the World Congress Center, if they get those funds, but I'm happy to follow up with you on that. That was not our, sometimes what happens is you'll see the Georgia World Congress Center Authority or other authorities where we have administrative attachment and those funds are placed there, but not necessarily at our request or other. We're a part of the process. Yes, sir.
Senator Norrock.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up question to Representative Mitchell's concern. The King Center is located in my Senate district. We were so happy to have the governor's message via video with he and his wife at the annual historic King celebration at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, also in my district. And so I was quite concerned to learn of this cut, of it not appearing in the budget for the next fiscal year, and just wanted to share that with you and point out that the visitors to the King Center and to the crypt of Dr. King years ago topped 1 million a year. There's no question about a link between the health of that nationally and internationally known facility and the internationally historic and economic development in tourism. Our second largest part of our budget. So it bears review and scrutiny to see that we support that effort and not be cutting funds from the state to it when it is a vital. You may not know. This week the Indian ambassador to the United States was here, and some of us had a chance to spend time with him. And he told me the very first place that he went was to the King Center and the crypt of Dr. King, and that just for me underscores the international impact that historic place has. And I don't know if you want to add any comment to that, but appreciate your attention to this.
If I may, it says on here that it's reduction of one-time funding, and I'm sure you all know we do that many times through these budgets every year, one-time funding to places, and I'm sure that was for a special cause at the King Center. Nobody debates whether it's important or not. We all understand the importance of the King Center, and we'll do what we can to continue that. So, thank you.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what you said about helping small businesses, particularly with exports, and that seems like a growth opportunity, but usually what gets the most attention is the big ticket items for the big companies. And one area that's always been a bit opaque for me is the process for tax incentives. Can you give us a very quick overview of that? And by way of example, like Rivian, what's the time frame by which the state is going to break even on the tax incentives that it provided to them, for an example?
There's two questions there. I may bring our general counsel up here, and the reason Andrew's been working closely on this, of course, but as it relates to process, yes. And perhaps at the chairman's discussion or discretion, we could certainly meet with Holcomb outside of this testimony for a process as well. If that would be, it might require more than a few minutes, if you'd prefer that. Would that be
If you want to go ahead and speak to what you know, and if you need to follow up afterwards, we understand.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll try to answer your question as best as I can. So in terms of the evaluation, it's a pretty complicated process. So we look at a variety of variables. We're going to look at things like job creation numbers, capital investment. Those are the two main factors that we look at. We'll also look at wages, what the type of jobs are, who the company is, right? What is their reputation? Where in the state are they locating? Is this a portion of the state that has already a lot of industry or very little industry? And based upon that, so with respect to incentives, there are essentially two types of incentives. There are statutory incentives, which are incentives that the General Assembly has authorized, right? Most of those do not require any approval, any discretionary approval for a taxpayer to take advantage of them. As long as the taxpayer meets the particular requirements of that statutory scheme, that company or individual can claim that on his or her or their corporate taxes. The others are discretionary incentives, and those are the grants that you typically see or other discretionary incentives. We have an evaluation process where we prepare, a profile for each project. We debate and evaluate it internally, and then everything is approved through the governor's office. So the governor is reviewing each and every discretionary offer that we make. So that's kind of the evaluation process in a nutshell. It's obviously more time consuming and more in depth than what I've covered here today, but I wanted to give you a brief overview. With respect to the payback and the ROI, that's a little bit more complicated of a question. We evaluate and we use some software that was developed by Georgia Tech. Dr. Alfie Meeks was developed for us called Loci. And that allows us to take into consideration tax revenues with respect to our discretionary grants. So we're able to plug in the level of capital investment, the value of the grant, and the wages that the company is intending to pay its employees, as well as a timeline for the number of jobs they're going to create. And based upon that information, we're able to make a determination of how long the payback scheme is. What I'll say is, a very small percentage of the projects that we worked, I know Josh mentioned, I think 358 projects that we worked last year, probably only about 5 to 7% of those actually qualify for and receive discretionary incentives. So it's a very small percentage. It's only those projects that are competitive with another state. So we have to be in direct competition with another state in order to make that grant. There's no reason for us to incentivize projects if that project's coming to Georgia already. But as we look, to that payback scheme, we're able to kind of evaluate based upon that software how long a repayment would take. I don't know off the top of my head what the repayment is for Rivian. I wouldn't presume to tell you that today. We certainly could round off offline and share that information with you. But in most cases, based upon the amount of discretionary money we're putting into a deal, the payback time is very short. It's usually just a couple of years. And at that point in time, the state will start to see positive tax revenues from the job creation. The software takes in consideration indirect as well, so all of the ancillary effects that you're going to see from job creation. So is that an employee buying a home and spending money in the local community, it's able to kind of take into consideration a multiplier effect, if you will, of the creation of those jobs and quantify it in a way that helps our decision-making process. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you. The first is on the FY23 budget. I know that Chairman Hatchett mentioned one-time funds. I thought we had one-time funds in for a Georgia Musical Heritage Partnership. I don't know where those went, and I was just wondering if there is, if y'all have any information on that, or if it wasn't used for that purpose, why it didn't come out in the 24.
Let me check on that. FY23?
Thought it was in the 23, yes. I just didn't see it come out in the 24. I didn't know if it was used somewhere else or.
Let's see. I definitely don't see it in this year's, and I'd be happy to get with you offline on that. Okay.
And we may ask some more questions about FY23 spends and where they went. That was in the letter. I know it would have gone to the commissioner, and perhaps he has it, but asking folks to be able to talk about their FY23 spends and that they went and were allocated and spent appropriately. Second question would be on, I appreciate your comments earlier, Josh, about working with other agencies and your partner agencies. And I would admit in this budget, I think you probably have more partnerships than with any other, at least dollar-wise, than with any other agency. If I'm counting up, I think in REBA, the $166 million is tied to you. The $130 million in Quick Start is tied to you. And I'm just doing back of the napkin math. It looks like probably about $400 million in GDOT improvements would end up being flowed through for intersection repairs, et cetera. That's roughly, $700 million right there. We're going to need a little bit more details on those projects from your guys and your agencies, if you don't mind, just to be able to understand them and understand their importance in this budget. I don't have any more questions, and if you know those numbers now, you can tell me, or if you want to wait and follow up with me later.
I can, Senator Tilley, I can give you a little bit of information on that. I don't have everything with a fine-tooth comb to go over, but largely, from what I understand, is the REBA allocation is intended to cover Hyundai and Rivian, and then the recent announcement in Bartow County. Obviously, with respect to Rivian and Hyundai, the $130 million that was allocated to the technical college system is for the cost of designing and constructing and equipping the 2 training centers that are going to be developed on site, owned by the state, for both Hyundai and Rivian. So I think the cost of those was roughly $65 million apiece, I believe. With respect to the GDOT upgrades, I don't have those numbers, so I can't say whether 400 is an accurate number or not. I just don't know. But I do know that largely the costs associated, or I'm sure a portion of those costs, a large portion of those costs, would be pertaining to the improvements that are being made to accommodate Rivian and Hyundai. And so there were access road improvements that were needed to be made on each of the sites, and there's a development of a new interstate interchange for each of the sites that will be required subject to federal approval, to accommodate the increased truck and car traffic that will be generated as a result of those 2 facilities.
I appreciate the way you approach the GDOT about what would be done. I guess when we go back to the REBA or the Quick Start, so I think it heard cost were. Since those haven't been appropriated yet, we think we're on the front end of that and need to be included in that process.
Understood, and I misspoke there. So those are costs that would be incurred. They have not been incurred yet because they haven't been appropriated yet. So I apologize for misspeaking there.
I appreciate you both being here today. It looks like there's no other questions on the board. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Our next presentation, I tell you, we're actually right on, we're 3 minutes ahead of schedule. If you'd like to take a quick restroom, water break, we'll do that, and we'll start back right at 2:30. Chair Lady Pridemore, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having us. I appreciate it, Chairman.
I know
Tilley.
y'all had some a handout as well. If the members of the committee did not get a handout, if you just stick your hand up in the air, we've got a few more. You can grab one.
We will make sure that you get a handout.
He's got them right there in the back. Senator Roman.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll give you the floor. It's yours.
Thank you, Chairman Tillery. Thank you, Chairman Hatchett, members of the committee. My name is Tricia Pridemore, and I am proud to serve the state of Georgia as a Public Service Commissioner at the Georgia Public Service Commission. I'm also proud to serve our staff and our other 4 commissioners, my 4 colleagues, as their chairman. So today we just want to talk a little bit about our budget. I'm open for questions. As you all know, we are an efficiently run agency, and we take a great deal of pride in being a regulatory agency that operates as lean and as efficient as possible, one of the leanest in the nation. So to go over a couple of highlights from your handout, 2022 was one of the busiest years in the history of the Public Service Commission. Our commission held hearings and dockets including the 3-year Georgia Power Integrated Resource Plan, where we make decisions about generation, transmission, and distribution of the state's electric system. Also, the Georgia Power rate case, which is a 3-year recurring case where we determine rates and rate structures as well as tariffs for the Georgia Power system. Monitoring of construction at Plant Vogtle, where there is a great deal of good and exciting things happening that I hope we'll be able to even celebrate a little bit before you all head back to your districts at the end of this season. We did an Atlanta Gaslight rate review as well. In many other cases, our body meets 4 times a month, year-round. 2 committee hearing schedules as well as 2 administrative hearing schedules. We do not have an off-season. We do not take breaks. During the pandemic, we moved our operations completely online and never missed a single hearing cycle. That is due to the hard work of our staff and commissioners, ensuring that we're able to keep the utility structure and systems of the state moving forward. Over the past several years, the PSC has described to this body a need for more personnel. Gratefully, very gratefully, this body gave us an additional 7 staff members last year. 6 of 7 are on the Utilities Division and work to be able to work on the exact type of policy cases that I bring up in bullet point 1. Already, we can see significantly how the work of our financial business analysts and commissioners has continued to reduce ratepayers' obligations, in particular with the Plant Vogtle construction monitoring process. The ROE has been reduced by the PSC from 11% to 4% at the time that the NCCR tariff was established by the legislature. And without this change, customers would be seeing an additional $12 on their monthly bills. This is equated to a savings of over $1.7 billion for Georgia ratepayers. In FY21, the legislature funded 2 additional call before you dig personnel. As you may or may not know, our agency also operates the state's pipeline safety operations, which is done not only for state purposes, but on behalf of the federal government. Those call before you dig personnel, that allows us to process dig claims or tickets, as you might also hear them being referred to through Call 811, faster, and allows us to ensure a safer system across the state. Not only did this 2 additional personnel allow us to be able to do a better job of faster going through the ticket process, it also made our rankings higher in our annual federal audits, which gives the state more federal money. Last year, the General Assembly provided the PSC $379,000 for an electronic filing system. We did a comprehensive bid process, and a vendor is under contract. When I talk about this, I don't want the members of the committee to think for a second that this was a replacement for technology that already existed. This was moving our agency from paper, CD-ROMs, and disks over into a fully digital electronic system. We've worked with several other state agencies and talked about best practices and how to implement. And this system that it's being deployed across other state agencies is being deployed for us. We look forward to that coming online in April. Since the FY21 budget, a total of $305,450 in legal fees have been appropriated to defend an ongoing lawsuit against the Secretary of State regarding PSC voting districts. The PSC is not a party to the lawsuit, but is the state agency billed by attorneys. As of October 2022, the Commission has been billed and has paid an additional $81,044.23 beyond appropriated funds. Bills for an estimated $203,000 in additional attorney's fees are expected to be received soon. This should finish the lawsuit's current process that is currently in the Federal 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. The PSC asks funding of $284,044 in the amended FY 2023 budget to cover these fees. The Attorney General's office has also suggested adding a 20% contingency as a potential contingency to the estimated billing. And lastly, the PSC is in need of security. We operate hearings, like I said, at minimum, with us, as the parties in the cases do as well. We've recently had a need to be able to look for the State Highway Patrol's support through this process, and for us to be able to continue that this year, it'll cost $47,840. That brings that the FY 2023 budget of $11.4 million, we're asking for $11.99 million. And with that, I can take some questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. You do have a couple of questions. Senator Huffstetler, Chairman Huffstetler.
Thank you, Chair Pridemore, for being here today. At the VCM hearing, the Vogel Construction Monitoring hearing, I think that was like the 26th one or something. Was that yesterday?
The 27th.
27th. Anyway, there had been, talk of the brace that needed better support, and then there was testimony yesterday that was false, that the brace wasn't there at all. And so my concern is, we're in our 7th year of delays. That is, it's a nuclear power plant, and we've got braces not there for the cooling system. The professional staff that we did funding on had recommended a rate increase much lower than what was approved, and in the past it said we could have gotten the energy for half the money. So, we still got the $30 billion plus in capital. Georgia Power's share of it will come on. That's going to be a double-digit rate increase. We've got the fuel increase next month. We've approved 2 more. When I add them all up, it looks to me like about 43% we could increase. Since Georgia Power's residential rates are higher than most of the states, higher than anybody in the South except Alabama, and higher than the average of the EMCs in Georgia, are you concerned that we're going to have energy, rich companies not want to move here because of these rates that are so high?
So, Senator Huffstetler, let me start.
This is according to the U.S. government website statistics, too. I will say that.
Let me start at the beginning of your questions and first state, I really am here today to speak to my budget and the budget needs of the agency. We hear cases and exhaustive testimony by sworn-in witnesses throughout this process, but I want to just talk about a couple of things that you brought up, because you did bring up several cases. VCM 27 is live and active right now. We do not know if the company will file rebuttal testimony, so I'm not at liberty to share anything that wasn't just a matter of the public record as of yesterday's hearing. There are 2 of the 4 pipes that the company has asked for a 30-day extension to be able to go in and replace, and so it's a pipe, not a brace, and so those pipes are part of the emergency cooling system. If you'd like more information on that, I'd be happy to put you in touch with the company, or I'd be happy to be able to clarify from witness testimony from yesterday.
Okay, and if I could ask one more quick question here. Bullet point, what was here, about the $1.7 billion. I know originally the company was going to make about $5.8 billion profit off of the original cost. With the cost going up, it's more like $15 billion if you use the same formula. So is the $1.7 billion off of the 5.8 off of the $15 billion that they could make, or does it have anything to do with either number?
Neither one. The 1.7 is from the original 12% that was passed in the NCCR tariff by the legislature. Once the NCCR tariff became law, it was turned over to us as regulators and tariff managers. We were the ones that reduced it back down to that 4%, which equates to the $1.7 billion in savings.
Thank you, Chairman. Chair Lady.
Hi, Mr.
Madam
Chairman.
Chair, I don't know exactly how to. My friend,
I answered all of it, including Tricia. That's fine.
I wanted to ask you a question about this bullet point number 3 on this sheet that was handed out. I wanted to ask, now is the 11% return on equity rate, is that still the standard rate? Is that still the standard rate that is applied to Georgia Power in general?
So in the rate case, we did pass an 11.5 ROE. The NCCR tariff is treated differently under a different set of a different ROE.
Say that again if you don't mind now.
Okay, so in the rate case, what was passed by the commission was an 11.5% ROE, but the NCCR tariff is treated differently. The commission has the ability to reduce the ROE on the tariff uniquely, so now it's at 4%.
Oh, it is 4%?
Yes.
Okay, but this reducing it to reduction to the reduction of 4%. I just want to make sure I understand that is on the existing and continued work on to build the units. Is that correct?
That's approved through the NCCR tariff.
Okay, and just one more, if I may, regarding this return on equity rate. Is that rate allowed to be set by the PSC based on legislation that is from general law that the General Assembly passes? Is that correct? Is that where you get the authority to do that, to set that rate on return on equity rate? I'm trying to figure out where you all get the authority to even set that rate.
So we get the authority through the laws of the state of Georgia and the charter of the commission, but in particular for bullet point 3, that addresses the NCCR tariff, and that is by the law that was passed by the legislature when the legislature established the NCCR tariff.
Okay, and then I said one final, but if this could be my final, I would just ask the PSC to possibly consider that maybe the return on equity rate should be lowered. Period. That if it could be lowered from 11 to 4 here on this, I think that return on equity rate could be lower certainly lower than the 11% in general. But if y'all would just consider that, that's all I'm asking.
Thank you, Chairman Parsons. Again, I really want to talk about our budget, and I'm welcome to talk about cases and how the commission is structured, anything to really do to understand the amount of work and the regulatory work that the commission does. Our office is open, and we have a standing invitation for any member of the legislature. Attend a hearing, we'll let you speak. We'd love to have you.
Well, Chairman Primore, that was your last question, so you're safe. Thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to get ahead of the game. Our next presenter is here. The Commissioner of the Department of Public Health, Kathleen Toomey. Dr. Toomey, if you'd like to come on up, we'll get ahead. Unless I hear any objections from the crowd.
You can do it if you like. This is that one right there. Okay, great.
Floor is yours. Thank you, Dr. Toomey.
No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and everyone in attendance. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I want to start off by saying you are going to be gratified to know that I will not spend the next 31 minutes showing you graphs of COVID rates all over the state. You can hold your applause. In fact, I am going to move right into the budget. But I do want to acknowledge the help of my staff who are here with me today. William Bell, who is now officially the CFO. Megan Andrews, who I think you have seen often around here as Assistant Commissioner. The Deputy Commissioner, Chris Rustin, from the Effingham County, where is he? But also Deputy Commissioner here at DPH, and Graham Segrist, who has joined us as our government relations manager. So thank you for their help in preparation for this presentation. I wanted to start by going over, once again, the structure of public health, which is so different than any other state agency, and quite frankly, different than any other health department in the country. It's a hybrid structure with a state office and districts that are overseen by physicians who work and report directly to me. But the county health departments are overseen by the district health directors, again, state physicians, but who serve as a CEO of the county boards of health that are independent. They are independent, 159 different independent entities, all serving the entire state of Georgia. You may remember that led to some challenges with consistency, but we have really, throughout the last 3 years, worked very hard to ensure we have much more consistent delivery of services across the state. And we'll be talking more about that. I wanted to highlight how we have been able to implement the FY23 budget items, because I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish. With your support and the governor's support, we've been able to fully deploy the $40 million additional dollars that came to all agencies, but to public health, not only to the state staff, but also to all county Board of Health employees. So that's 4,000 county employees also received this supplement. So about 86% of that went to counties, not to state office. But in addition, your leadership collectively led to an additional $16.3 million to raise the salaries, particularly for those workforce high turnover positions that were so critical during the pandemic. And I certainly heard yesterday from my colleagues over and over again about workforce. It's certainly still an issue for us, but this has really made a big difference, particularly around nurses and hiring public health nurses, epidemiologists, as well as environmental health professionals. So we have really been benefited from that additional funding that we received last year from the General Assembly. In addition, the $9.9 million, which is used for the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, has been critical to bring us up to the state-required match. This is a federal program. Some of you may know about it. It provides HIV care to uninsured or underinsured individuals. And as you heard Commissioner Nagel talking about yesterday with the unwinding of Medicaid, we are likely to see even more demand on this program. But we are also able to expand the formulary with these additional funding, which was something that many of you had talked to me about, including single-dose treatment, which we were very slow in being able to implement. Well, now we have that, and I'm really pleased that I can report that. Because that's a new development since we were last here together. And also your leadership on funding the lead program, including the lead inspectors that will allow us to implement the lowered lead levels. And we are purchasing the testing machines, and also have hired 8 and are in the process of hiring additional 10 inspectors for the other counties. So each district, each of the 18 health districts will have lead inspectors specifically devoted to ensuring that kids are safe in their homes. I wanted to go on to strengthening public health partnerships, because this is something very important to us. And I think you heard that we are really focusing right now within the Department of Public Health in partnership with all the other state agencies that serve women and children, mothers and babies, both on maternal and infant mortality, as well as improving outcomes. And we've worked with the 3 agencies you heard from yesterday, as well as DECAL and others, as we're trying to coordinate a response across all agencies to address maternal and children's needs. The springboard for that was some funding you gave us last year, which we have put already to good use. Initially, $1.2 million as a pilot program with AU to follow high-risk mothers and try to identify those highest risk moms who may have the poorest outcomes, and also 2 pilot projects for rural maternal health. One in Seminole County, thanks to a senator now at DCH who really, again, saw the importance of this work. And I know Senator Tillery knows about the Toombs County project, which we finally are getting approval from the hospital for that contract. So we're moving forward with both of those projects. And just a quick shout out to the Sickle Cell Foundation, with whom we have worked for many, many years, and have been able to use those resources to expand rural care for children and others with sickle cell. I think it's worth repeating something that we talked about before, because it's so, again, very, very different than many other agencies. If you look at the split of how our funding is used, and I want to make a point that this does not include the federal dollars for COVID. We got a significant amount of money, which I will talk about in a little more detail at your request, but not in probably as much detail as you'd like to hear, and can provide spreadsheets for you at a later time if you would like. But out of our total budget, 65% go to direct services, and so that means actually to the people's needs in your communities, much of that in grant and aid to counties, as well as things like WIC, the Women, Infant, and Children's Program, other direct services. If you look at contractual services, many of those are direct services to people, because that includes ADAP and other direct care contracts. So we really have relatively little of our total budget going to personal services or to our staff, and particularly at the state office. There's about 1,000 staff now. There was at one time, and you may remember me talking about this, 2,000 additional staff that we had to bring on for COVID to do contact investigation and other work, but they have fallen off the rolls at this point with the decline, the fortunate decline in COVID cases in our state. But if we look at the breakdown in a different way, you get another point of view here, and that is that more than half of our salary, our funding, our appropriations, and again, this does not include the COVID dollars, which would skew it even more on the federal side. More than half of our funding is federal funding. And again, that includes things like WIC and all the CDC funding, all that HHS funding that is not COVID, and then the state general funds, which more than half goes to the counties in grant and aid. So you can see that we are really very much federally funded, and more so because of the pandemic. Tobacco settlement funds also largely go to services. Those are being used for cancer state aid, which many of you know about. It's been in place for quite some time. I was asked to just present an overview of our COVID funds, and we received a significant amount of federal dollars. There's no question about it. I think the one thing I have to say is that unlike the CRF or ARPA funds, we did not have flexibility in how we could use those funds. HHS, and particularly CDC, was very prescribed in how we could use those funds. And for example, I was trying to work with Commissioner Tanner to convert some of the school testing funds to possibly do some behavioral interventions, because the need in schools right now is for behavioral health interventions, and we were not allowed to do so, although we've sent the message, up through our colleagues at CDC that all of us in the states, not just here in Georgia, but in every state, would like more flexibility with the COVID funds that we have. But much of that funding is already obligated or is targeted for special projects like workforce, like other partnerships that we've had with the business community, which has been so incredibly productive for us. I did want to shout out 2 specific grants that I think are particularly important for you to know about. You may have read about in the paper the Strengthening Public Health Infrastructure, Workforce, and Data Systems grant that every state got some funding from this. We got some funding, and I'm really very pleased that in addition to support for workforce at the state and much of the district, what this is going to do is going to allow us to have a uniform electronic health record. And I think it's going to shock you, particularly those of you who work closely with the hospital systems, that public health does not have a uniform electronic health record, and in fact has 159 different electronic health records. And so if you, as some of you have, call me up and ask me, how many services of X, Y, or Z have you provided? How many pap smears have you provided in the state or to my county? I have to get an amalgam of all these different records and often hand tally them to be able to give you that full report. Well, this will allow us, joining with the other support you've given us for other IT infrastructure, will allow us to implement a statewide EHR, which is long overdue for public health, and will allow us not only to take better care of patients, but quite frankly, be more accountable to you for the dollars that we're expending. The other, I think, important federal grant that we've gotten is the Epi and Lab Capacity Grant, which is going to allow us to upgrade our laboratory. And many of you know, some of you may remember that our laboratory on Claremont was built during Zell Miller's administration, so it's been there for a while. And although it was somewhat upgraded after 9/11 to give the capacity for biosecurity and anthrax testing, that sort of specific testing, we've had very few upgrades, although, and really had some challenges during COVID to meet the capacity needs. This is going to allow us to really enhance our ability there within the lab to improve not only the infrastructure there, but also the types of testing that we do, so that we're not meeting the needs of the current needs, but meeting the needs of the future, which is what we need to be doing looking forward. And I'm really excited about that work. So looking at the governor's recommendation over the last 2 years, for supplemental, we have no changes. And so it's really what I had described to you that we're currently implementing. But for FY 2024, we do have some changes, and I'll go through them pretty quickly so there's time for questions. The governor's statewide recommendations that you've heard about from the other agencies have been are here in our budget as well, and we're very grateful. Any increase in staff salary to help our workforce and help recruit and retain is just incredibly important, particularly now as we are all struggling to recruit nurses, as we're struggling to, and competing with other agencies as well. And so I'm very grateful for that. There's only one reduction in our budget, and that was for the McIntosh County ambulance equipment and repair. That was a one-time funding for last year, and we didn't expect that to continue, so that is the one reduction that you'll see. The other addition was to expand the pilot program for PrEP. PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis for HIV. Again, remembering that we in Georgia have among the highest rates of HIV in the country, but our rates are very high in rural areas, not just here in Metro Atlanta. So that combination of the increase in sustainability of funding in the ADAP program, as well as our expansion of the PrEP program, is going to make a big difference across the state. We did a survey of our districts and saw that we had good programs here in Metro, but there were some rural areas had not implemented PrEP at all, pre-exposure prophylaxis at all. And recognizing that, the governor included in his budget an expansion to be able to reach those rural areas without the PrEP program. And we're hoping the combination of those two will really help us end HIV in Georgia, as we hope to achieve. And the last and final maintenance, renovations, and repairs for the Georgia Public Health Laboratory are state bonds, so will be directed again to some improvements in the lab. I didn't tell you that over the Christmas holidays, on a morning I woke up when it was 5 degrees outside. It was also, I was called almost immediately to be told that the pipes at the laboratory had burst, and we were unable to do testing, and all the computers that we used to send results out were destroyed. And so much of that holiday weekend was spent by many of our team over there trying to clean it up. The one thing we didn't stop doing was newborn screening, because that has to go on every day, regardless of the holiday. But we were able to continue that. Unfortunately, those machines were not damaged, but some were, and all the computer reporting machines were. And that was a wake-up call about the importance of this infrastructure at the laboratory and that combination of federal and state grants, which will allow us to do that. And finally, before I leave, I think I've actually finished even on time for a change, uncharacteristically. I just wanted to give a shout out to my other health commissioners, because we have been meeting, Commissioner Brose has been using, with some of her funding, we've been able to support women with services that may otherwise fall through the cracks. In her agency's care, the same with Commissioner Noggle, the same with already Commissioner Tanner in his 1 month on the job, and also DeCal, who's been working closely with us as we're trying to address the pre-K health issues as well. And so I can't say enough about the kind of, I think, post-COVID energy that we have now directed towards maternal and child health issues, which is extremely exciting for us all to be working on. So I'll close there and leave it open for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Timmy. I think we share in your excitement for the coordination that you are working with the other commissioners on so many different projects, and also probably your excitement that you've kind of gone back to a normal operating world in your department, which if there is such a
real
thing.
Public health person, yes.
You do have a few questions. We'll start with Chairman Beach.
Thank you, Commissioner. You said something about going to electronic medical records?
Correct.
Can you tell us, I can't find that in here, what's the cost of that going to be to implement those electronic medical records?
We do have a one-pager describing all of our systems, and we have budgeted in that federal grant about $4.2 million, and we have a description written. We haven't yet put it out for bid. The bids have been completed on the other IT projects, although we are going to have to rebid the surveillance system project because it's too complicated a project for any single vendor to do. So we're in the process of putting the business case is put together. We have not put it out to bid yet.
So 4.2 million?
Correct.
Thank you.
And it'll be uniform, it's going to be consistent across the 159 counties.
That 4.2 million, I just want
Federal.
is across all 159 counties, medical records for 159 counties?
It's going to start us off anyway.
And I know that's still a big number, but it's only 4.2 million?
We're going to ask for more federal money.
No, we just heard.
It's federal. Don't worry, I'm not coming to you. I've been there. I've been in your office with my hat in hand. No, we are definitely, this is something that is of clear priority for the federal government, particularly post-COVID, when they couldn't get data from the states, and we couldn't get data from our own county health departments. And so this is the first step to begin that process. And hopefully that, what we see, that workforce grant, which is multiple millions, has 40% of it must be spent in the districts. And so what is what is actually created by that EHR can be implemented using the rest of that federal grant. So there may be some left over, there's maybe maintenance of effort required, but I'm not going to promise I won't come to you, but I'm going to definitely look to on the federal side for that because of the priority that has been placed on that.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Dr. Toomey. Recognizing that part of the mission of your department is to help keep the population of our state healthy and to prevent disease, with the recognition that prevention usually saves money over time. First, how are we doing on that? What are the trend lines? 2, what are your priorities in terms of prevention and interventions? And then 3, if there is extra money, what would you request in terms of making interventions? Thank you.
I think that what you know, and I know, that the trend lines have never been optimistic in Georgia, and particularly now post-COVID, because what we've done is redirected our entire attention to the COVID engagement and the outreach and the testing, which we will continue, and we are continuing. We have a largely federally funded chronic disease prevention program. I think to me the most important priority right now is to work with the other state agencies on home visitation, because I truly believe, even with existing funds, if we use those funds in a coordinated, consistent way across the agencies, we will be able to provide prenatal care and prenatal assistance. We will be able to work with mothers prenatally, postpartum, and those children, as they grow up. And even using things like the WIC program much more effectively, getting outreach. Again, a federally funded program, but one that I think is not reaching as many children as needs to, because many of our WIC clients didn't come into the health department during COVID, and many of our workers were not in the health department during COVID. So I think this is a time when I don't want to judge our numbers, because this is a time when so much attention and energy was focused elsewhere. But I think we can begin to work on some of those high priority areas. And right now, for us, I think collectively, seeing some of the challenges that Commissioner Brose has, seeing some of the other issues we have, I think that addressing maternal and child health in a very proactive way will be probably my top priority, and I think many of our teams.
Chairman Kilpatrick.
Hi, Dr. Toomey. Thanks for your presentation. You and I have talked a lot about maternal mortality, and I'm encouraged about the home visit program that you talked about. I just wanted to see if you could talk about that a little more. You sent out a one-pager that's kind of an update on where we are with maternal mortality, and in working with DCH and the other parties that would be really administering that program. You had said that you were going to have an updated, fuller report on where we are with maternal mortality. Can you give us a timeline?
Yeah, no, in fact, I knew you were going to ask that. And I asked my team, and they said by early to mid-February at the latest. And we are going to see an increase in maternal mortality during the time of COVID, as has been reported elsewhere. But, this is something that was not unexpected. But sad, but not unexpected. But we will be seeing it so February soon.
If I may, Dr. Toomey, will
Yes,
that
sir.
break down by county?
Probably not, only because maternal mortality, you may have one county with just one person, or one county or with two people, and we don't like to release numbers that, but I think you'll see trends that are very clear.
I've heard that before, but there's a definite problem in that, because if the counties don't know the issue, how are they going to work to solve it?
Oh,
so that's I don't know that I don't know that the federal government agrees that we need to keep all that information secret. I mean, I know if you really do some digging, you can find out who the child was, but we still need to know the information. But I'll hush.
I mean, there's
Okay.
when you think about maternal mortality, it's a relatively rare event. It's an unfortunate and tragic event. It's a relatively rare event. But what isn't a rare event are near misses. And we know where those occur. And there's a significant number of near misses where you have close to very bad outcomes. And we do track those as well.
Okay.
And those are not in single digit, those are in multiple digits. And we know where those, and which is precisely why AU is working with us on some of this monitoring of individuals with very high blood pressure, because that can be deadly for a woman during pregnancy who have existing heart disease that worsens during pregnancy. So we recognize what the risks are, and so we know where those women are, and we know what the interventions are, and we're beginning to get projects like the AU project, like the Toombs and Seminole County projects into those areas with highest risk, and try to ensure that the services needed for women both before and after birth, because it's not sufficient to just say, once you've had the baby, there's not other things to be worrying about. So we're very committing to ensuring that. But I can share with you some of the data, even the maps that are considered to be highest risk counties.
Thank you. Two more questions. Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Toomey, thank you so much for your presentation. My wife is a medical doctor, so I've been trained well when she talks to shut up and listen. But I wanted to ask you about the expansion of the PrEP program that you talked about for the 4 regions, Rome, Gainesville, Waycross, and Athens, 1, 2, 9, and 10. Are those the 4 remaining districts, or is this a process of rolling them out in other rural districts that don't have them at all? And if you did do all the remaining at the same time, what would that look like from a budget impact perspective?
Well, those were the districts that reported back to us that they did not have a program. And some of the other rural areas have very robust PrEP programs, believe it or not. And we knew metros, the metro area had them. But, we could, with additional funding, we could certainly do more or provide more sites. But this will provide navigators, nurses, the lab testing, kind of the wraparound services that you need, as well as the education, which we can't provide with necessarily with our federal funding.
Senator Rock.
It's an appropriate time to thank you for your lifetime of service in public health. It's long and it's historic, and you've broken a lot of records, and we're just, I think, very fortunate that you agreed to take this post yet again with this administration. The 2 things, high-risk mothers pilot tracking in Seminole County and in Toombs, was that correct? And then expanding the sickle cell services in rural areas. And this kind of follows this last question. That pilot that you're running, and you have run very effective pilots over your lifetime career. I'm aware of those on chlamydia, for example, and in rural areas of Georgia, determining the startling rates of infection that moved us to, put legislation in place. So you say that's a pilot to track high-risk mothers. And you're hoping to determine, you get a model there that we can then expand?
Correct.
And what's the money that we're putting out now for those?
I think it was about 1.2 million for the AU. And I honestly believe, particularly if we coordinate with AU in an effective way, we can probably do more counties than just those few, because what they're doing are tracking blood pressure, tracking at home, and particularly if our pilots for home visitation prove to be effective, which I believe they will, where we are monitoring blood pressure pre and postpartum, I think we will be able to use those money even more effectively as we expand. I know there's been some discussions about doulas. These are not nurses, these are not midwives, but they provide support to moms. I mean, that's again a model that could be incorporated into the home visitation model as we look at some of the work we're doing. But we have a small group that actually covers all of the health agencies working together, and we're going to see kind of how we can build a model that's cost effective, but also able to combine our resources in an effective way. I will be honest with you that there's so many of us doing outreach and home visitation that literally one outreach worker said to me, you go in to see the mother and you pass somebody else leaving from another agency where we didn't know that the other agencies were there. And plus we have those programs that I believe we could be able to expand with federal dollars and with a fairly aggressive management, including Babies Can't Wait and CMS. And so I'm looking forward to that challenge. And we have had some COVID losses, as it were, in the sense that people left public health during COVID, I think because of burnout. And we've been able to kind of restructure the MCH and child health program to a format that we hope will be most effective. So we're in the process of doing that now.
Well, I appreciate the term fairly aggressive because, as we all know, lives are at stake in seeking to expand and build out these services in county after county after county, particularly in light of hospital closures that have not been a plus for sure in terms of rural Georgia, but in my district in downtown Atlanta, with the Wellstar closing East Point facility and the Boulevard facility. That's a trend line that we need to be moving to reverse, and that's not all in your bailiwick. But I'll close with the final question. When you were head of public health in prior years under a different administration, you told us that you were at 3,000 peak with the pandemic in terms of your staff. You're down now to 1,000 here now in this era. How does that compare with your prior leadership at the public health department? In terms of
we had more WIC clients back in the 90s.
Had more
WIC. We did more aggressive outreach. I think we can do, and again, that's totally federally funded, and unlike most programs, the more clients you see, the more money you get from USDA. So we have every incentive to do outreach, to do education, to get all the other health agencies, from DFACS to DECAL, helping us identify WIC-eligible families, because we will get more funding. And so, but our WIC budget is lower, because during the pandemic, women fell off the rolls and we weren't as aggressive seeking them out.
I know your department will continue to stay in touch with us on the budgetary needs and this aggressive expansion that is really called for.
No, it's very exciting, and I really want to thank the other health commissioners who have been so supportive.
Thank you, Dr. Toomey. We appreciate all you do and all the work your team continue to do to make us a healthy Georgia. So next up is, I seen her.
Thank you. It's Commissioner Rebecca Sullivan from DOAS.
Yep.
It's so good to see you. It's so good to see you in person.
Advance your slides, it's just that button right there.
Thank you.
Hey, members, if you don't mind, if you still want to carry on conversations, if you don't mind moving to the back of the chamber or exiting out into the hallway. I appreciate you. Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan, it feels like it's been a long time no see, right?
Good afternoon.
Welcome back.
It's a pleasure to see you all again. This time to talk about the great work, the good work that DOS is doing, and the work that we plan to do with the funds that are recommended in the governor's budget. I'm going to speak to two programs today, the DOS risk management. Briefly, I'll touch on workers' comp again, and as well as address the governor's recommended funding for the property insurance program in both the amended 23 budget and the FY24 budget. Then I'll switch gears a little bit and revisit the topic of workforce issues. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to introduce the problem. Today, I plan to tell you what we're already doing and what we plan to do to address it. I'll kick it off with workers' comp. As mentioned yesterday, DOS was appropriated $150 million in the amended FY22 for the purposes of settling workers' comp claims to reduce future liability to the state in that program. I'll repeat it because I think it's worth repeating. The funds allowed us to settle a total of 686 claims, and we estimate that settling these claims will result in a projected reduced future liability to the state of $240 million. Many of the claims settled were more than a decade old, as you can see on this chart. 468 settled claims originated in the 2010s, 158 claims originated in the 2000s, and 12 from the 1990s, with 2 from the decade of 1980. So the funds were utilized to settle some old claims, get those off the books. It's a very wise investment. So we're very pleased to report the success of our settlement activities, but we recognize that there is more work to do to minimize workers' comp claims and their associated costs. Approximately 5,000 claims are filed every year, and we currently have 4,000 open workers' comp claims in the state's program. In that regard, DOS continues to make efforts to assist agencies in reducing their claims through our comprehensive loss program. It's an independent program within our risk management division. We provide an assessment tool to agencies to help them leverage claim data for workforce enhancements and that are aimed at loss prevention. We're also working with targeted state entities that have high risk through proactive safety reviews to help them minimize the claims. We're working with targeted agencies to help them get their injured employees back to work quicker. And finally, we're exploring technological enhancements in our risk information systems, risk management claims, and data analytics to improve efficiency and reduce claims costs. So we will continue all these efforts to keep the future liability of this program down. And now I'd like to turn your attention to the property program, for which the governor has recommended funding for in both the amended FY23 and the 24 budget. In addition to the workers' comp program, DOS also directs the state's insurance program for property. As part of that program, we provide insurance coverage for more than 15,000 state-owned or occupied buildings and their contents. The insured value of these buildings and contents is over $42 billion. DOS insures the first million of each occurrence, and we have a $1.5 billion tower of excess coverage for building and contents through excess commercial carriers. We also provide various specialized lines of property coverage to state entities such as auto physical damage, marine, aviation, and business interruption coverage. Like our other lines of insurance, the property program is funded primarily through premiums that are assessed to agencies based on a percentage of the value of their assets. This chart gives you some information regarding the status of the trust fund for the property program. The premium billings are reflected in the blue line, the program costs are reflected in the black line, and the property trust fund balance is the orange line. As you can see, property premiums have remained relatively flat for some time, while program costs have increased, and that's resulted in a depletion of the property trust fund. DOAS did receive a one-time appropriation of $18.6 million in the amended FY22 budget to avoid a deficit to that program, and we used that fund to help offset the cost of the excess property insurance. And the governor has recommended an appropriation of $4.7 million in the amended FY23 and increased billings to agencies in FY24 in the amount of $30.5 million. Those appropriations will help keep the program in the black, and we fully support that recommendation because without that appropriation, DOAS is projecting that we would have a deficit of those respective amounts at both the end of FY23 and 24. So we would certainly appreciate your support of that. To give some context to the increase in program costs, the cost of excess insurance has dramatically increased over the past several years, and that's demonstrated in the graph on the slide. This increase in the cost of excess insurance has significantly impacted the overall cost of the program, and the increase has largely been driven by the condition of the property market. The market was soft for many consecutive years, which allowed us to purchase excess insurance coverage for a much lower rate. However, the market has hardened recently due to a number of factors, including several significant events across the United States that resulted in record consecutive industry losses, and that's driven an increase in insurance costs an increase in cost for insurance coverage across the board. So while we project costs in this program to the best of our ability, as you all know, Mother Nature can be quite unpredictable, and that can have both a direct and an indirect impact on the program. For example, Winter Storm Elliott, that's the several consecutive days of freezing weather we had back in December across much of the state, that will impact the program. Preliminary reporting by agencies has identified $17.5 million in damage across 64 state structures from that weather event. Yes, I know the slide says 15.7. It's grown to 17.5 since I submitted my slide for this presentation. So while this will be considered one occurrence under our policies and it will really result in only a $1 million direct payment from the program, the rest of it will be covered by our excess insurance. These types of events do impact renewal rates and options that are available to the state as we negotiate our renewals of excess property coverage. So as we do enter the next renewal seasons, we will evaluate different options and rethink our strategies to make sure that we have the proper limits and proper self-retention in the property program to appropriately insure our property, but also minimize costs to the state. So closing out this portion of my presentation, we do strongly support the governor's recommendation for $4.7 million in the amended FY23 and $30.6 million in FY24, and we would very much appreciate your support as we work to ensure that the state's $42 billion in building and contents, as well as our other property assets, are adequately insured. So much of DOAS's authority and responsibility relates to management of the state's physical assets, procuring them, insuring them, and disposing of them when they're no longer needed. Excuse me. But our responsibility also extends to the area of human capital, arguably the state's most important asset, and that's our state employees. Yesterday, I introduced the hole in the bucket problem when it comes to the state's workforce, which is illustrated on this side. The rate of separation of state employees has exceeded the rate of hiring and has for several years, which results in a declining bucket of active state employees for established budgeted positions. One of the governor's priorities has been to maintain a quality workforce, which is necessary to provide the level of customer service that the Georgia citizens need and your constituents deserve. We do this by slowing the drain and refilling the bucket. We do anticipate that the enhancements to the state's 401k match and the COLAs from last year, as well as an additional COLA recommended this year, will be helpful in that regard. The governor's recommended budget for FY24 also includes some funding to DOAS to further support the state's efforts toward state employee recruitment and retention. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you what how we propose to utilize those funds to address this issue. But first, I want to just give you a little bit more insight into the workforce issues. The graph on the left side of the screen depicts the state's annual turnover rate for full-time employees since 2016. As you will note, the overall turnover rate has been on the rise since 2017, with the exception of 2020. And in FY22, the state's overall turnover rate exceeded 25%. The other graph on this slide depicts the state's voluntary turnover by generation, and that gives us some insight into the increasing number. Generations X, Y, and Z are reflected on this slide, with Gen X having the lowest turnover. The black line in the middle represents millennials, and the purple line at the top reflects Gen Z in the state's workforce. So as you can see depicted on this chart, the younger generations do not stay in state employment as long as the generations before them. This becomes a bigger issue as they become a larger part of the state's workforce. Currently, millennials and Gen Z make up almost 40% of the state's workforce. So we do know from national research, if we want to retain younger employees longer, which we do, it's important that the state as an employer develop new strategies to meet the needs of our modern workforce. On the other side of the spectrum is employee retirement. In the executive branch, 1 in 10 full-time employees could retire immediately, and as many as 1 in 4 could retire in the next 5 years. So as many in our state get ready to retire, it's important that we focus on succession planning and recruitment, or refilling the bucket. This slide provides an important data point regarding recruitment. The state is receiving far fewer applications for open job postings than it did only 5 years ago. While the state received an average of 78.3 applications for each job posting in 2017, the average for 2022 was 15. So while the increase in turnover, the turnover rates increasing the workload on agencies to recruiting for state jobs has definitely become more challenging. So I think a key takeaway from this slide is that we know we need to increase the state's applicant pool. One way to do this is through marketing and branding state jobs. Another way to do this is to examine minimum job requirements, particularly for hard-to-fill jobs, and make sure we've got those right. So I've shared a lot of data with you today, which is available in DOAS's FY22 workforce report published on our website. But it's also important to note how this is actually playing out in the agencies. The quotes on this slide were taken from remarks made by commissioners during last year's joint appropriations hearings. So we've recognized the trends related to workforce data. We've heard the concerns of agency leadership regarding recruitment and retention challenges, and we strategized about how DOAS as an enterprise agency can step in to assist. The Workforce Strategies Initiative is an effort that we have already undertaken. We've recognized that DOAS, Human Resources Administration Division, which I'll call HRA to save about 30 minutes, as many times I'm going to say that in the next few minutes. HRA is well suited as an enterprise agency to bring our sister entities, state entities together to address the recruitment challenges facing this, and we have done it. We have a lot of progress has been made, a lot of work has been done. So a year ago we formed a partnership with UGA's Carl Vinson Institute, the Georgia Department of Education, the Technical College System, and USG with support from the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. We brought together a number of agency leaders, collectively identified government jobs with significant recruitment and retention issues that are in multiple agencies, and we formed work groups to develop strategies that will boost employment and interest in those jobs. The 5 categories of jobs we identified are entry-level post-certified law enforcement, accounting, IT, social services program consultants, and procurement. So this novel approach has sparked a remarkable amount of collaboration between agencies, and we've seen the benefit of partnership and communication as those work groups have worked together to develop strategies to support recruitment, including career pipelines and pathways. This is the first time that many of those agencies have sat down together to address a common issue like this. I'd like to go ahead and give you an example because we're pretty excited about what we're seeing here. I'm holding in my hand the initial report from the law enforcement work group with their recommended initial strategies. There are 9 different agencies that are represented on that work group and have been working over the past year to develop these strategies. They've developed goals and strategies around marketing and branding of law enforcement jobs, enterprise recruiting, partnerships and collaboration, and career development. And I'd like to share with you a couple strategies they developed and are already working on. For example, while we have law enforcement jobs in several different agencies across the state, each agency does their own recruiting in a silo. So we know that an applicant to GBI or Department of Public Safety who may be not qualified for that position may very well be suited for a law enforcement job in a different agency, but we don't share that information. This group recognized that one of their recommended strategies is to create a career listserv so that they can share applicants across agencies. We shouldn't be working against each other as agencies. We should be working together to fill the state's employment needs. So all 5 work groups, this is just an example. I have 4 more of these reports on my desk, and that's just one of the many strategies that they have recommended. But we're excited about the opportunity and that's been created through this collaboration and working together. All 5 work groups will continue to meet to begin implementation of these strategies and discuss progress and lessons learned. We're very grateful for our partners and the participation of state agencies in this effort. The commitment, time, and thought that they have voluntarily put towards this effort has been remarkable, and we believe it will continue to be productive. So what's next? We are anticipating a final report in the coming months that will capture all of this work. And we're in the process of planning a summit to bring together state agency leaders to share best practices, toolkits, lessons learned, and develop further solutions. But this work doesn't end with a summit or a report. We know that this work around employee recruitment and retention must be ongoing. So this is why DOAS has proposed to form a new unit within the HRA division to work exclusively on these issues. The HRA division of DOAS is funded through assessments to agencies that receive our services, and the governor's recommended increasing assessments by $770,000 for that purpose. So this unit is going to do a number of things around recruitment and retention. We're going to continue to support coordination among state entities, build critical partnerships, maintain these workforce strategies work groups, and look for future enterprise solutions. We plan to collect feedback on what's working and conduct analysis to assess the impact and apply results into revised tools to support enterprise workforce needs. We plan to help improve strategies around recruitment activities, including building talent pipelines and expanding the state applicant pool. We want to focus on developing and refining career pathways to attract prospective employees and retain them. And we must focus on employee retention. As highlighted by Chairman Hatchett yesterday, we do not currently have reliable enterprise-wide system data about why employees leave state jobs. 90% of the reasons for a voluntary employee separation in 2022 were coded by state agencies in the system as resignation, change employment record, or presumptive resignation. So that is the system-wide data that we have, which is woefully inadequate. And we completely agree that the state should have better enterprise data regarding employee departures to better inform our decision-making. So while we're working on modernizing the state's human capital management system, which will assist in this regard, we know that the state needs better information now. So that's why DOS has proposed doing a retention study to help us better understand the reason why employees leave state government, the causes of high turnover, so that we can better inform decision-making, develop effective strategies and best practices to meet the needs of our workforce, and reduce the turnover and its related costs to the state. We are actually currently soliciting proposals to assist with this work, and if I'm invited to speak to you again next year, I fully anticipate having some better answers. In summary, the goal of this new unit is to help fill the bucket and reduce the size of the hole by looking at new strategies around recruitment, expanding our applicant pool, and developing recommendations for retention. I believe that this recommended funding is an investment in maintaining the state's quality workforce. We fully support the governor's recommendation and request your support as well. And I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to start off the first question. I was looking at your 22 funds and the $150 million for comp. I know you said we were able to resolve 868 claims. OPB encumbered those over in FY23. Are there any funds left in 23, or have those all been expended?
We have expended the $150 million. We actually spent $157 million settling claims. We recognized some of the administrative costs that we plan to save by settling those claims and use them to settle a few more.
Thank you. That was my only question about your 22 funds. You got a couple of questions from members in the audience. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two different topics I want to ask about. The first is follow on Chairman Tillery's question, and it's about the unemployment claims. How is it possible that there are claims from 1982? That's older than some members of this committee.
The workers' comp claims, because there are employees that are still receiving benefits. I think that's largely catastrophic claims receive lifetime benefits, and it's difficult to settle those claims. So that, yes, they're still on the books for former employees.
Okay. So they're still working, it's just the claim
They're not
itself
necessarily working, but they are still entitled to lifetime benefits.
Okay. So the claim is not fully resolved, is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay. And it takes sometimes as long as 40 years to resolve these?
It can.
Wow. Okay. The second thing is on Chairman Hatchett's question with respect to the retention aspects. We get great detail in terms of our subcommittees about the turnover rates, and I serve on the public safety, and I recognize that some of those agencies have extraordinarily high turnover rates. Do you have a report that has the turnover rates writ large across state agencies? And if so, could you share that with us?
So the turnover rate for FY22 for just the executive branch, I believe, is 29.2% this year.
But by agency?
But by agency. I'm not sure if we have that data. If we don't, I'm sure that we can put it together and get that to you.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing is there any practice, or will there be a practice of having exit interviews in terms of gaining better understanding as to the reasons why people are leaving?
Yes, and we believe that some agencies may be doing exit interviews, and they may have that knowledge at the agency level, but they're not inputting it into the system in such a way that we have enterprise-wide, insight into that number. We do encourage employees to do that, and we'll continue, employers to do exit interviews, and we'll continue to encourage them to use the more specific job codes that are in the system. I did mention yesterday that we are, in the process of replacing the state's human capital management system, and this is one of the things that we're going to address in the new system. There will not be an opportunity for an agency to code an exit as simply a resignation without more detail.
Thanks.
Thank you for the questions.
Senator Orrock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Commissioner Sullivan, appreciate your being with us again. and for that fulsome report of the collaborative effort on addressing the retention and recruitment. I had a couple of questions. The partners within state government that you're connecting with on this include the university system, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And the technical
Yes.
colleges. Has there been a recognition or any forward movement on lifting the barrier for young people who have gone through our education system, finish high school, and are not allowed or are considered ineligible to apply to our major universities because they are DACA recipients?
We have not focused on access to the college system, to the university system. Our efforts have simply focused around eligibility for state employment.
I see. I mean, it's so, there's just direct links, are there not, between who's coming out of our various educational institutions, or where our high schoolers are that are college eligible and seeking college admission, when they cannot apply at Georgia Tech, at Georgia State, at University of Georgia. That's not seen as a talent that remains undeveloped. I mean, it means kids either don't go to college or they go out of state, and they're paying because they're expected to pay in-state tuition. I mean, out-of-state tuition.
I understand your concern. Recruitment for state employment is a very big issue.
Yes.
And across the state. And so what we're focused on at this time is not the education aspect of it, but bringing folks into state employment and looking at minimum job qualifications. Do you even need a college degree for some of these state jobs? I think about a third of our only around a third of our jobs in the state employment system require a college degree and have no other equivalency. So we're going back to look at those jobs and determine, is a college degree actually necessary? That's something that we need to reevaluate as we work to expand the state's applicant pool. But thank you for your question.
And following up, I know you're aware in your position of the fact that the commitment to have 3% cost of living increases for our retirees was removed from statutory language, and that's another thing that I would recommend looking at in terms of, are our state jobs attractive? Yes. How are retirees from state employment being treated these days?
Yes, I think that there's so many things that we need to look at this. Actually, when we started the Workforce Strategies Initiative, that whole initiative was going to focus on both recruitment and retention.
Right.
And when we got into it, we realized this is so big, we need to address recruitment right here, and we need to look at retention separately. And that's why we've proposed this retention study, so that we can bring in some experts to come in and help us determine what are the reasons employees are leaving, and what is the best way, what are the best strategies that we can employ, and retirement could certainly be one of those strategies.
Thank you. Yeah, because we're challenged, and this is not new to organizations far and wide, to grow with the times, to stay modern, to get ahead of the curve, and it's very easy for big institutions like state government to be 2 decades behind, if not more, on some of these things. But thank you for your comments today and the information you're bringing, and hope that this work going forward can really move the needle.
Thank you. I hope to come back next year and give some very positive results.
Thank you.
Representative McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question. So you went back to the college education. I know a lot of my constituents I'm a retired firefighter, and that are post-certified, and they would like to work for the state, but they don't have a college degree, and they're not eligible to be DNR agents because you have to have a college degree or 4 years of military, which was just recently added. But what about a police officer that's been a police officer for 10 years and he'd like to be, he can't even apply. So
I think that you make a valid point, and that's one of the things we recognize is we need to expand the applicant pool. We may have some unnecessary minimum qualifications for state jobs, and we need to look at those, not only so our citizens who are interested in public service are able to apply for those jobs, but that we can expand our applicant pool, have a better selection of quality applicants to come to work for the state in public service. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Commissioner, in your research and reports that you're doing on recruitment and retention, it will be interesting to me to know where we are in terms of the diversity of our workforce, because sometimes it's not readily apparent as we move around here. But is that going to be included, and are you going to have strategies to diversify the workforce as part of your work product?
At this point, we're just trying to fill our jobs. So diversity is not yet something that is a part of the recruit and retention initiative, but it might be something that we could look at some point in the future. I will mention the information about the diversity of our state's workforce is included in the workforce report that we do every year. So there is information available about the diversity in the state's workforce.
Commissioner, thank you. You've answered the questions of the members here today. Appreciate your presentation and also following up from your presentation yesterday. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
We're a little ahead of schedule, but if it's okay with you guys, we're going to start ahead of schedule and keep going. So please, if you do need to leave to run to the restroom or grab a bottle of water, if you don't mind just kind of staying quiet, and we'll ask our state's Attorney General, Chris Carr, if he doesn't mind coming on up and getting started.
Thank you, Chairman Tillery and Chairman Hatchett, and I appreciate the joint, you want me to hold off? Yep.
We'll give them a second just to get out here, but thank you.
My apologies.
No, we appreciate you being prompt. The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. And again, I appreciate both the chairs. I appreciate both committees for having us here today. And I'm going to break my presentation into two parts. One, talk about the appropriations that y'all provided to us last year and the work we've done, and then address the requests that we'll have for the amended 23 and FY24 budget requests. I also want to start by saying thanks to this committee for your support in our building renovation program. I saw yesterday that fences are now up, and it appears that work has begun, and I'm very grateful for that. Going back to FY23, appropriation for our first statewide ever gang prosecution unit. Additionally, in addition to you providing funds for that unit, the legislature passed into law, and the governor passed legislation. The governor signed into law last year, giving our office the authority to prosecute gangs. Obviously, public safety and combating criminal street gangs has become and is and will be a top priority for the state. I think it's important to remember that the communities most often terrorized by gangs are lower income, racially diverse, and immigrant populations. And as I have said before, all Georgians deserve to be safe. And because of the resources you have provided, we are doing just that. The Georgia gang investigators estimate that 60% of violent crimes are gang-related, so this unit's creation is perfectly timed to be a force multiplier in this fight. So with the new unit, we've been working hand in hand with local, state, and federal law enforcement to ensure that violent criminals are aggressively prosecuted and put behind bars. Since its creation just this past July, just 6 months ago, our gang prosecution unit has indicted 50 alleged gang members for a range of crimes that span 13 counties across Georgia: Cobb, Clark, Barrow, Bullock, Candler, Chattooga, Daugherty, Fulton, Gwinnett, Lawrence, Monroe, Muskogee, and Walton. And these results were made possible also with partnerships, particularly with local law enforcement. And I particularly want to commend the GBI, Department of Corrections, Barrow County Sheriff's Office, Albany Police Department, Athens Clark County Police Department, University of Georgia Campus Police Department, Cobb PD, Marietta PD, Columbus PD, Muskogee County Sheriff's Department, and the Paulding County Sheriff's Office. And as we mentioned last year, we've been focused in in 4 particular areas: multi-jurisdictional gang cases, prosecuting gang activity within the correction system, working with and supporting DAs in gang prosecutions, and where certain DAs have chosen not to enforce the gang statute, prosecuting cases in those particular jurisdictions. And I want to give you 3 examples of these cases, of cases that we've indicted. In October, we indicted 17 alleged gang members with the 1-8 Trey Bloods in Barrow County. This indictment followed a large-scale investigation known as Operation Dawnfall, and it was conducted by GBI and Corrections. And these 17 defendants are alleged to have engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity for the common purpose of illegally obtaining money, weapons, and property for the gang. Some of the criminal acts included murder, aggravated assault, armed robbery, and the trafficking of fentanyl and other drugs. And of those 17 defendants who were indicted, one of the individuals is alleged to be a national leader of the 1-8 Trey Bloods and is currently incarcerated in Attica State Prison in New York. A second defendant is alleged to be a statewide leader of the gang and is currently incarcerated in Hayes State Prison here in Georgia. And while incarcerated, these 2 individuals are alleged to have directed other defendants to engage in criminal activity to further the 1-8 Trey Bloods criminal enterprise. But one of the most egregious elements of this case relates to the alleged recruitment of very young children, from promoting and hosting block parties to arranging for ice cream trucks to stop by the local neighborhood. And gang activity is targeting our schools and our children more and more. It's particularly egregious and must not be tolerated. And with the rise of social media, it's helped to expand the reach and frequency of this illegal activity. So recruitment's on the rise, and the age of the members is trending younger and younger, from 7, 8, and 9 years old. So the second case I want to bring up, this past November, we indicted 4 alleged members of the Perps criminal street gang, which was founded at a local high school in Daugherty County in 2017. And this particular gang includes members as young as 10. And then the third involves the very first indictment that we obtained. It was in Athens and involved in a shooting that's alleged to have occurred on the UGA campus. So we could look forward to continuing to work with you, to work with Governor Kemp, members of the General Assembly, on legislation that seeks to focus on the anti-recruitment aspect of gang violence, so we can prevent and protect our young children from entering this life to begin with. From the human trafficking perspective, you provided some resources for us, and just as a reminder, in 2019, the legislature funded the state's Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit, and it's been successful bringing forward human trafficking prosecutions and rescuing victims. While the additional human trafficking positions provided for in last year's budget, with those additional resources, the state's been able to grow its prosecution efforts, rescue more victims, and prosecute labor trafficking cases. So, we have 46 defendants currently under indictment for sex or labor trafficking, and some with multiple cases. In 2021, our Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit rescued and assisted 107 victims. In 2022, the unit rescued and assisted 116 victims. And in 2022, our Human Trafficking Unit led or assisted 33 case investigations, some involving multiple suspects and defendants. And last year, we obtained 6 convictions, including our first conviction of a buyer. This particular defendant was sentenced to 15 years, including 5 to be served in prison. He's also the second person we've convicted as part of an ongoing multi-defendant case that involved the sexual exploitation of a 15-year-old female victim in Clayton County. We also continue to go after those that are selling our children for sex. And in August of 2020, we secured the conviction of a man who sold a 14-year-old female for sex in Gwinnett County. He was sentenced to 25 years with 15 to serve. And I just want to mention, once we open a case, our team continues to review every possible lead, which is critically important. Last month, we indicted 2 people in DeKalb County for allegedly trafficking a 16-year-old female for sex. This is important because those 2 defendants are already awaiting trial on separate human trafficking charges in Fulton County. And I really want to commend our team for staying on this particular case and making this connection. It's because the initial charges stem from our rescue of a 14-year-old girl who'd been missing from the College Park area for approximately 7 weeks. And the 2 defendants, along with 2 others, were subsequently arrested and indicted in Fulton County in January of 2022. And also, we see a connection between criminal street gangs and human trafficking, which is why our Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit and our gang unit are working together to protect our most vulnerable. In November, we announced the arrest of 8 individuals in Gwinnett County following a major investigation into human trafficking and criminal gang activity. This case will be prosecuted by both our Human Trafficking Unit and our Gang Prosecution Unit, and it involves the alleged trafficking of 4 female victims, including 1 minor. And again, our team also continues to participate in trainings for the private sector as well as for other law enforcement as well. And then you provided us 2 positions for cybersecurity IT last year, an infrastructure manager that's been critical to help manage the implementation of the agency's security plan and provide for security of the agency's IT network, and an application manager that's worked to ensure that the most up-to-date technologies utilized along with necessary software updates, patches, and other necessary capabilities in order to maintain security of the department's software and applications. And then the Solicitor General Unit, you provided a position for us there as a reminder. Our Solicitor General Unit handles multi-state litigation and state and national appellate advocacy, and we appreciate the additional resources. This position's allowed us to handle the increasing number of multi-state suits, which has gone up to 12 last year from just 2 a couple of years ago. It's allowed us to handle more of the critical litigation and appeals in Georgia without the need of hiring additional SAGs, and we've been able to file amicus briefs in cases with Georgia-specific interests in more cases. And finally, we've been able to handle more oral arguments than in years past. In 2022, the unit handled oral argument for 11 appellate cases, including 1 Supreme Court case, 6 Supreme Court of Georgia cases, and 4 11th Circuit cases, which is up from an average of 5 per year in the previous 2 years. So that's the update that we have on the money that you have provided for us in the past, which we greatly appreciate. We have an amended FY23 request and request for the 24 budget. As far as the amended 23 request, this request is critical to us to meet our budget needs. We're asking for $633,445 to address the COLA shortfall, $174,253 to address the ERS shortfall, which is $807,698 total. We're requesting both items to address a difference in amount appropriated in FY23 and the actual cost of those items to our agency. As you all recall, these were statewide changes in the FY23 budget. For the $5,000 COLA appropriation, the law program was appropriated just a little over $1.4 million, while the actual cost was just over $2.1 million. And for the ERS employer contribution appropriation, the law program was appropriated just over $1 million, while the actual cost to administer was just over $1.2 million. So our numbers are based on actual cost to the agency instead of a report that was run on our agency's budget prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, and we ask your serious consideration to fill that gap. As for FY24, we are, and subsequent and related to that request, we're asking for $6,582,414 for merit-based salary increases for our attorneys and to annualize the COLA and ERS shortfall amounts I just mentioned. So the salary increase would be $5,774,736. The COLA shortfall again, $633,445. ERS would be 174,253 for, again, a total of $6,582,414. And it goes to what Commissioner Sullivan was just talking about. Workforce. We are regularly losing attorneys to other state government positions, in addition to federal and local governments, as well as the private sector, because our salaries, quite frankly, have not kept a pace and are not competitive. For example, our starting attorney salary is $65,000, while many private sector firms are paying over $200,000 base plus bonus. Tort litigation in our office is very similar to insurance defense. So competing with the private sector is very challenging in that particular practice area. One of our senior human trafficking prosecutors is getting a $45,000 pay increase to go work for the DeKalb DA's office, and she just recently left in the last couple of weeks. We're experiencing 5-digit pay gaps between our prosecutors and county prosecutors. One former employee recently went to work for a client agency for a $25,000 pay increase. And another recently went to work for one of our state's universities for a $50,000 pay increase. And we recently just lost a job applicant to Ledge Counsel. And let me tell you, y'all are getting a great lawyer. And the reason was pay. Our turnover rate has grown from just under 9% in 2018 to 16.67% in 2022. We had 50 employees leave during FY22. Providing salary increases will allow us to better recruit and retain attorneys so that we can continue to provide quality legal representation to the state while keeping SAG costs to agencies down. Because the reality is this: the state will continue to be sued. There are going to be legal needs. There are going to be litigation needs. We're going to have legal representation costs. So the choice is, do we want to invest in the Department of Law and the lawyers that we have to provide representation no cost to the agency, or will we be forced to go to the private sector to hire SAGs, which the agencies will have to pay for out of their own budgets, effectively acting as a litigation tax to those agencies? But the good news is that every year our office generates revenue that we send to the Treasury for this committee to appropriate, and which can be used to pay for our requests. So I'm coming with a problem and a solution. Over the past 6 fiscal years, we've brought in an average of over $14 million to send to the state treasury through our consumer protection efforts. Now, this does not include opioids, and this does not include any punitive damage cases, but over $14 million that the state has not expected and did not appropriate and wasn't budgeting for. So this is, additionally, so that's $14 million per year, but this fiscal year, just the first 6 months alone, we've brought in over $22.4 million and sent it to the Treasury. So what we're asking this committee to do is please use those settlement funds to appropriate the amounts that we asked for to invest in our law department rather than us having to rely on SAGs. In fact, this $22.4 million alone from this fiscal year, these 6 months, would justify funding our proposal of $6.5 million for nearly 4 years. And we're only halfway through the year and are continuing to generate revenue. So that is the biggest request that we have. I would ask your consideration. We have a problem. We have a funding source. We would ask you to appropriate those dollars and to help us shore up the lawyers in our department. Our second request will be for $1.75 million for the gang prosecution unit, a digital evidence management system, a software program, and storage costs for FY24. Building gang cases and collecting digital evidence requires our office to store and retain incredibly large amounts of data, and in particular, video data. There has been a proliferation of video evidence used in criminal cases and an expectation of juries for the presentation of video evidence. We collect much of this evidence from local authorities such as in-car, body cam, and municipal video surveillance. and from private sources such as doorbell cams, business surveillance, hotel surveillance, and airport surveillance systems. This digital evidence management system will enable us to more effectively investigate and prosecute human trafficking cases and gang cases, and it is much needed by our prosecutors. Our third request is $90,000, which is in the governor's budget request as well. $90,000 for salary, benefits, and operating costs for one human trafficking analyst position in FY24. With the support of First Lady Marty Kemp, funding for one analyst position within the Law Department's Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit would enable our office to identify and go after illicit massage parlors throughout the state. And our fourth request is for $16,867. It will be for state funds appropriation for 2 investigator vehicles in FY24 for our Medicaid fraud program budget. This increase in $16,867 would allow the Medicaid fraud unit to access $50,601 in additional federal funding for a total of $67,468. So the addition of 2 investigator vehicles will allow our Medicaid fraud unit to more effectively investigate and prosecute fraud and recover taxpayer dollars on behalf of the state. And with that, Mr. Chairman, my presentation is complete, and I'd be happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. You do have several questions. Representative Oliver.
Thank you, sir. From the tobacco settlement money 20 years ago through the opioid settlements, and from your presentation, we are learning how much more money we are receiving from these major lawsuits. I'm learning about it in the newspaper, and as these settlements become more sophisticated, particularly relating to how we can use the money, I want to know more about it earlier, and I'd like you to consider, sir, having some kind of information platform on your website that'll tell us what you recovered this year, the $22 million. Is it specified in your settlement to go directly to the governor and not to us, or to directly to a trustee? All of that is just information that Appropriations members and Judiciary Committee members might like to know. Thank you, sir.
No, it's a great point. It came up last year. In opioids, so tobacco I know a little bit about, but that was before I got here. Opioids is a unique animal, and I'd be happy to talk with anybody about the opioid settlement. We talked last year because we had to have the litigation bar passed so that we could participate. It was unique, and it's candidly a generational settlement when you've got tobacco and you have opioids. The vast majority, I'm talking about, right, correct me if I'm wrong, 99% of the settlements that we enter into, the money goes directly to the Treasury. There have been those in the past, like opioids, which was 56 states and territories. There's 3,500 cities and counties that were a part of this nationwide settlement. And as we mentioned to appropriators last year, I mean, this was the train that was leaving the station. And the question is, do we want this money now that we can use to try to abate the problem, or we had filed a lawsuit in business court in Gwinnett County. We can continue to do that, but we might not get any money. It wasn't perfect, and we talked at that time because the vast majority of the money does go through to the Treasury. We certainly, again, I'm open to any conversation about being more transparent and open, because again, the money goes to the Treasury. It's the state's money. It's not our money. We don't retain it, as I mentioned that before. We pay if we do have some costs. There are times where we will pay costs, but that's minimal. But the vast majority of the money goes, and I'd be open to any conversations as far as how we can be more transparent on that. But most of it goes to the Treasury, the vast majority. Yeah, and I tell you, again, I'd be happy to talk with anybody. Maybe the change in these multi-states and the size of some of this litigation is getting more complex, and it should be the states that take the lead, but now you've got more folks that are picking up city and county clients, and that's changed the dynamic as well. So yeah, there's a lot more that we're open to have that conversation. Thank you for the question.
And just tagging along with her, Attorney General, is I know that 99% of the claims do come to the general fund, but because of what's gone on recently with these claims, it's not 99% of the dollars. And I want to make sure that we're not mixing the statistics there. And thank
Fair
you
enough.
for what you've done to help us get involved with it so far. We want to continue to be involved in answering these questions and making sure that we're involved in this process going forward.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, too, I think that's a good point. I think my job is to get the money to the state. You know, and again, so it's like VW had one as well, where you had to use the money a few years ago for clean energy. I mean, there are times where you have those settlements that are cookie cutter, and you know, what we had recently with Walmart and with CVS and Walgreens and some others came up, and we reached out to the appropriators, we reached out to leadership in the House and Senate governor's office and said, look, because when we did the litigation bar last year, promised it was going to be narrow, that it was just going to apply to this. We knew that there were appropriators that were concerned about the money going to the trust rather than into the general fund. I totally get it. I just feel like it's my job to try to get the money to the state, and then it's y'all's job and others, a governor's office and OPB and others, to have that conversation. But we just want to make sure that the state has access to the money.
Thank you. Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. AG, on behalf of my colleague Debbie Buckner, she wants to know if your gang work that you do in the major cities are having a negative impact on the surrounding rural areas associated with those cities. What is your take on that?
Well, no, I think what's happening is if you have jurisdictions that aren't going after gangs, that's the problem. Because gang members don't care what the city line is or the county line, and if you've got somebody in one jurisdiction that is prosecuting and somebody else that doesn't, you're going to have gang activity that's going to go into those areas that don't. And again, I go back to my original point that I mentioned in my presentation. Who is most often getting terrorized by gangs? Lower income, racially diverse, and immigrant populations. Article 1, Section 1, Paragraph 2 of the Georgia Constitution says it's the paramount duty of government to protect person and property. I think all Georgians deserve to be safe. But it's also why, because it is multi-jurisdictional in nature, you have to be able to work with DA, with federal, state, and local law enforcement, because again, it doesn't even care about the state line. You could go into other counties, other states as well. What I want folks to know, though, is in Georgia, we work together to keep our communities safe, period. That's end of story. And so I've actually seen it's the communities that are less likely to go after gang activity that are causing problems for their neighbors, not the ones that are going after gang activity.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for your work with gangs. Tell us what we're doing about fraud. We've seen a lot in the news lately about fraud. Is fraud still high on your radar, and what are you all doing about that?
Through our white collar prosecution. So I want to commend, we've got a new Deputy Attorney General for Prosecutions named John Fowler, and he's done an outstanding job. We now have 3 sections within our prosecutions team, the human trafficking gangs, and then white collar unit as well. The white collar unit is absolutely going after fraud in this state. What I've said is if you have stolen one taxpayer dollar, you need to be held responsible. So whether it has to do with some of the funds that have been, talked about as far as during COVID, or if it's a state employee that inappropriately, use the buying process or whatever, I don't care what it is. If you are taking from those and violating the law, I don't care who you are, one taxpayer dollar, everybody is going to be held accountable. And I like that because again, we're seeing a lot more financial fraud as it relates to gangs and human trafficking, who's funding what, and but again, you got to be able to work with the federal government on that as well, because a lot of times we're seeing fraud that's coming from not just out of state, but overseas. So you've got to be able to work with the federal government on that as well.
Mr. Attorney General, it's amazing. All the attorneys want to ask you questions. Chairman Gunner.
Thank you. Attorney General, I know your staff is made up with administrative attorneys, and then you also have litigators in there. And I'm curious as to where you're losing most of your people. Is it on, I guess it's on the litigation side?
It is in particular, what I'll tell you, is in our torts division, where, basically if an agency gets sued for damages, we work with DOAS and we get reimbursed an amount to represent them that's actually been a funding source for us. And we've got right now 4 openings in that division. So if anybody knows any lawyers that want to come work for the state, we will take any opportunity right now to hire those. From the prosecution and human trafficking division, we've seen people that actually took pay cuts to come work for us. And as I just mentioned with the human trafficking prosecutor that she came from DeKalb and went back, got a $45,000 pay increase. So we're seeing it in a number of different areas, but I mean the delta is just, again, and it's just the over $200,000 certainly is Metro Atlanta, but I've talked to lawyers from Waycross and Macon and others. I mean that $65,000 starting salaries is tough. It's tough. It's just not competitive. And so we're trying to do what we can again, because at the end of the day, if we can't do it, we're going to have to hire more SAGs. So, Wright, do you have any additional thoughts on where we're kind of losing folks? Wright Banks is our chief deputy at the department.
Right, if you don't mind going to the mic.
Is it okay if I use this?
That's different, but it works for me.
If it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'll just borrow it. Typical problem is they come and gain experience. We can, historically, we've been able to get people at our entry salary. They come and stay 3 years, they gain experience, and they leave us. And we don't really get any return on the investment, so to speak. What's happened to us now, though, is the 65 is not competitive to get them in the door. It won't bring them in the door. It just won't. And so we've sort of run into the problem of the experience opportunity doesn't sell the job anymore.
And Chairman, and the members of the committee too, I want to mention the increase that you would give us would be merit-based. It would allow us to raise the starting salary, maybe 75 or so, but also is going to allow us to also retain folks. So it's not going to be everybody gets the same amount of money. It is we are going to do it on a merit-based program.
Thank you. And as a former DA, I'm really surprised that you're losing people to DA's offices.
So in that vein, Mr. Attorney General, from a mathematician and an analyst and not a attorney, what percent, and I know you may not know this right off the top of your head, so I'd love to know it, what percent of your cases does your department or your actual employees try versus those you have to farm out?
To SAG, that's good. We can get that. I don't have that right now, but I'd be more than happy to get that for you. That's a good question.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. With respect to this classic question of whether or not it makes more economic sense to have more in-house assets in terms of lawyers or to outsource, I want to drill down into that just a little bit. With respect to the $65,000 starting salary, and I would agree with you that I think that is definitely on the left side of the bell curve and is going to limit where you're going to be. The $200,000 seems to me more on the top of the market, and so I'm curious, after 5 years, and recognizing the answer that just was given that you're seeing a drop off after 3 years, can you give us a sense of salaries after the 5-year-ish mark, and if that's a little bit better?
Let me turn to the chief deputy on that one.
And I'll come to the right microphone this time. If you come in at $65,000 in our office and you work there 5 years, you're going to be in the 72 to 75 range.
Okay, I understand.
That's where you're going to be.
Which is very challenging. Okay.
Very challenging.
And then I think what I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the SAG budgets are portioned out to the agencies, and that's millions of dollars a year, and it would be far cheaper to have individuals hired by the Department of Law because that would be cheaper. With respect to that, are the issues that the SAGs are handling, are they really unique where you need lawyers with really specific niche practices, or are they something that you could hire in-house and then handle those types of cases?
It's a good question. Like when we got, improperly and illegally sued by Florida when they tried to steal our water and we won in the Supreme Court 9-0. That's a joke. That was a good one. We beat Florida. Come on. That we needed a special, practice area, so we hired that specialty. We have, obviously we use SAGs and DFACs. We use them for Department of Transportation because of volume, geography, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of all over the board. And Wright, do you have another way to answer that question that may be a little bit more helpful to Representative Holcomb?
Right. There are certain core areas, though, where when you have vacancies like the Attorney General mentioned, say, for example, our tort section, when your number of lawyers goes down and we have vacancies, that pressure valve is going out to a SAG. employment section is very similar. State has a lot of employment litigation. When that section is down lawyers on salary, who, remember, we pay the same thing no matter how many hours they bill or how many hours they work. But when you're down positions, that work is going somewhere because it's going to continue to come in the door, so it's going out to a SAG. With some agency is going to feel that in their budget.
Okay. Thanks.
Chairman Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for being here in your presentation. Thanks for what you're doing to, be tough on crime and fight these gangs. I think I heard you say that there are DAs that are not prosecuting cases, and then your office steps in and does that. My question is, one, can you charge that DA's office for your attorneys and their time, number one? And two, is there any way you can reprimand that DA for not enforcing the law?
No, the answer is no. We can't recover any costs, but because we've now got the jurisdiction to be, and Athens is the example. That was the example that we've had. In fact, our first indictment came from Athens. We've just indicted our 11th individual from Athens. And as I understand, the DA has now asked for a gang prosecutor, now asked for an investigator, asked for a victim advocate with the county commission. But we've had to backfill because of the situation that's there. So, and again, in some states, DAs report to the Attorney General, not in Georgia. They're constitutionally separate, constitutionally elected. We have a former one in the room right now. So it's a whole different situation. We have had situations that we have indicted DAs, though, for violation of oath of office and from some other issues, but those were substantive of nature, and bribery had been a part of a couple and that sort of thing. So no, look, I have great respect for DAs. I have great respect, but they are constitutionally separate. They don't report to me, and so that they were responsible to the people that elect them.
Chairman Knight.
Thank you. Attorney General, thank you for your work and all you're doing. It was very impressive with resources we gave last year, and thank you for, again, the staunch stance that you're taking in protecting Georgia. As a non-attorney, this is more of I know you and I spoke last year. As you know, and we spoke, Centene, which has Peach State, and they purchased WellCare last year. Obviously, the spread pricing, Georgia was one of the 3 first states to discover the spread pricing where they're overcharging the state versus the reimbursements to pharmacists. That was a lawsuit. Do you have any updates on that, where we are with that in that?
Yeah, no update on that. Again, the agencies have owned the data. And so we'll represent any agency that it wants to at the time that they're prepared, if they want to or not. It's up to the agency to tell us we want to settle a case. We have no update on that, but we stand ready whenever an agency wants to engage in that process. We'll do the legal work for them.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You got it.
Thank you. Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Attorney General Carr. This is a quick question, I think. I missed your figure on what your request is to eliminate the overuse of SAGs. I think you put a figure out there.
Well, part of what it would be is if we could invest in salaries, it would. If we don't do that and we lose folks, we're going to have to use more SAGs. But the amount that we asked for specifically would be $6,582,414, but that would be $5,774,736 for the salary increase, $633,445 for the COLA shortfall that I mentioned that we have to cover going forward, and then $174,253 for the ERS shortfall we need going forward as well. Otherwise, we still got a hole. So $6,582,414.
$6,582,414.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Attorney General, you have 2 more questions.
Okay.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Attorney General. Just 2 quick questions for you. You talked about your efforts to interrupt the recruitment process that gangs are engaged in as far as young people are. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on what those efforts are? And then secondly, really quick, somewhat related, on the human trafficking issue, what efforts are you guys engaging in to target hotels, websites, social media platforms that are also accomplices,
Great.
more or less, in human trafficking?
Great question. So we have 2 analysts that work on our team, as well as working with the GBI on human trafficking and identifying online. A lot of what's going on is online. Part of our request for this year would be for another position to specifically go after illicit massage parlors. So that would enhance our ability to do that. But a lot of it is online. I mean, if there is a way for 2 human beings to communicate, Facebook, Instagram, Tinder, I mean, you name it. If there's 2 ways, then there's a way for human trafficking to occur. And we've got some very sharp individuals that focus on that, work with our investigators, work with local law enforcement. But again, I will say this is why those relationships with federal, state, and local law enforcement are so important. Everybody has limited resources, but when you start working together and leverage those resources, we have better outcomes on that. Remind me your first question again. I got all fired up.
No. Thank you for that. No, my first question was just, can you elaborate on?
Oh, anti-recruitment.
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
So 2 things. So we've got legislation that is going to target adults who are targeting children for recruitment. So we're working on a bill, working with the governor's office, a couple members of the legislature that have had an interest in that. We've not introduced anything yet, but we're working with our partners on that piece. But it does remind me, I created in 2017 the Georgia Anti-Gang Network that has 4 pillars, is to focus on improved communication, improved prosecutions, improved intelligence sharing, but also anti-recruitment efforts. And that's been the biggest challenge. What are some programs that we can identify and deploy them statewide? Because what's going to work in Atlanta, we've got an Atlanta Police Foundation that's got millions of dollars. They can do things that somebody, say, and not picking any, hey, Hyra or Hawkinsville, maybe that program doesn't work. But we may have ways that we can work with nonprofits, houses of worship, schools, athletic programs, arts programs, whatever it may be. We need to identify, and that's been the biggest challenge. How do you identify those programs? How can you show a young person that this is not the way to go? We got to do it. So I'm open to that as well. And so we do meetings of the Anti-Recruitment Network about twice a year. The next one we do is going to be focused on anti-recruitment, this idea of it. So we're open to any suggestions. If you've got programs that we can help others deploy, let's do it. I mean, it's got to be an all-in type thing.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Representative Miller, I think that's Representative Panich, but I can't see her really. Okay, Representative Panich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon,
Hey,
Attorney
good
General
afternoon.
Carr. You were talking about the 10-year-olds who are being recruited. Obviously, you're not indicting 10-year-olds. At least I assume you're not indicting 10-year-olds.
Right.
What are you coordinating with the local juvenile justice authorities, or what are you doing? Because, if the 10-year-olds are caught up in this, what are you doing to get them out of the gangs?
Yeah, well, that's this is what I'm talking about. What can we do collectively to do it? Because, if you arrest an adult and incarcerate them, you can release them in another part of the state, or they can move. A child can't move. A child's got, again, you are in the community that you are in. That's the challenge that we have. I think that's the biggest weakness that we all collect. And I would, standing before the legislative body, again, encourage everybody to be thinking through what can we do and what more should we do. But yes, those partnerships have to be there. And I mentioned nonprofits, boys and girls clubs, you name whatever it is. But we're open to that. But at the end of the day, right now, we're in the prosecution business. That's what our office does, is prosecute. But I think on a human level, we all got to come together and figure out ways that we can work together. We've done it with opioids. We've done it with human trafficking. We've done it with a few other task forces that we've done. This is the biggest challenge, though. I think, what can we all do on recruitment? And we'll have some legislation to talk about that.
What number are you? Do you mind hitting your button one more time? 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go.
Thank you. I don't expect you to have the answer right now, but if someone can get back to me, how young is the youngest person you've indicted in any of these 46 cases?
You got it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Attorney General, that's the last of the questions. I have one piece of information I'd like for you guys to follow up with me on, if you don't mind.
Sure.
In other funds, about $58 million of your budget is other funds. I'm imagining it's payments from other agencies.
SAGs.
Just for the members online, they said it was billing the other agencies for the SAG work. Can we get a breakdown of that? I thought it would be like, basically what I'm looking for is the bill. DHS was billed this. DOT was billed this. I'm looking for that breakdown. if you've got it down to the detail level, we can go by SAGs too, that's fine. But I'm going to be looking at it both ways, just to see kind of what we're looking at department-wise. That's all of my questions. We have no more questions. Mr. Chairman, you have anything further? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Thanks to the committee. We appreciate it.
So with that, we are, hold 1 second before we leave. I think most of y'all have probably seen the news today that we had a state trooper that was shot this morning. I have received a notice from the colonel that he is in critical but stable condition, and to please include him in your prayers, and his family. The family is with him, so he is stable but still has a road to go. So keep them in your prayers. We will be adjourned until 9 in the morning, and we get to hear from all the attorneys in the morning. So I'm sure all attorneys will be here bright and early. So thank you all for being here today.